Chapter 12:19. She kissed him for nothing. Jojo was furious. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have kissed him just now. Regardless of whether she kissed him or not, she still had to make up for it 3 times. Prince Mo read the meaning in her eyes and almost laughed out loud. He hugged her and swayed her small body as he laughed. "Jojo, you're so cute." Humph. He carried her off the bed and personally picked out clothes for her to wear. When he bent down to help her put on her shoes, Xiao Yao's voice came from outside. Pulling the little fellow up from the bed, Emolien turned around and called out, "Come in. We'll go after breakfast." He patted her head and turned to head to the side chamber to change his clothes. His clothes were wrinkled from being pressed down by this little rascal for an entire night. He wouldn't be able to see anyone if he didn't change. His mental state was completely different on this trip to the Mystic Beast Forest. Previously, when he sent her to the Mystic Beast Forest alone, Prince Mo was all sorts of discomfort and disdain that they would be gone for too long. Now that the 2 of them were going together, he was melancholy again. His mother-in-law had only given them a 4-day deadline, and they could only go back and forth for 4 days. This trip was too short. During breakfast, Prince Mo secretly told his wife something. "Do you know who owns that house of treasures?" "Whose?" Arbor bit on a steamed bun and glanced at him curiously. Seeing his secretive expression, she couldn't help but whisper, "It can't be opened by one of your brothers, right?" "You guessed right." Emolien was instantly speechless. "Why are you so smart? Children can't be so smart." "Humph, you're the child. The person behind this house of treasures is Brother Great King." Emolien fed her a mouthful of porridge before taking a spoonful himself. "Are you a bit surprised? He's always been poor, but he actually has the money to open a house of treasures this time." Prince Mo shifted his stool towards Arbor and whispered to her, "There's someone behind him." Arbor also lowered his voice. Who could it be? For him to be able to receive such a large amount of wealth in such a short period of time, it naturally wouldn't have appeared out of thin air. There must be a source. "We'll know once we check." Arbor nodded. "I'll leave it to you." She wasn't the least bit interested in investigating things. Lazy. Emolien stretched out her finger to tease her in amusement. She seemed to be talking to herself, but also seemed to be extremely puzzled. "Why were you so diligent in cultivating before?" "I will never say it in this lifetime." Embarrassing. Emolien supported her chin with one hand and grinned at her. "Jojo, how do we get there?" "There are only 4 days to go back and forth. Of course, we'll let your stinky golden dragon take us there. The sooner the better." "You're the arrogant one," Yanqi said angrily. Arbor rolled up his sleeves. "Come out." Okay. I'll let him take us there later." Emolien helplessly took her little hand. She was used to these 2 little fellows fighting each other whenever they met. "Can I beat him now?" Arbor turned to ask Emolien. Emolien glanced at his wife and shook his head sincerely. The little fellow immediately stood up angrily. "Forget it then." Yan Qi's angry voice sounded. "You're planning to beat me up whenever you can beat me, right?" "That's right. You, little Mo. I'm going to die from anger." Okay. Don't be angry." Emolien was speechless. She coughed softly and pulled Arbor out. "Little 7, come out." Chapter 12:20. A dragon tore through the air and appeared in front of them. It angrily swung its tail and pointed its butt at them. Look at him. Look at him." Arbor grabbed Emolien's hand and gritted her teeth. "This stinky dragon." Emolien didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she pulled her to her side and comforted her. All right. Little 7 might look like he's lived for hundreds or thousands of years, but he's actually still a child among the dragons. Age doesn't bring wisdom." Arbor pursed her lips. Little 7th Yen immediately turned his head and glared at her angrily. "Little Mo. Okay. Emolien shook her head in amusement as she looked at these 2 little rascals who couldn't get along with each other. She reached out and carried Arbor, then flew up and landed steadily on the golden dragon's back. She raised a hand to pat little 7's head. "Let's go, little 7. Little Seven swung his tail and darted into the clouds. Not long after the two of them left, Gong Chong, and hurried over and grabbed Xiao 11Z at the Eastern Palace's entrance. He asked, "Where's His Highness?" "His Highness just left." Xiao 11Z looked at him in surprise. "Manager Gong, what's the matter?" "Ah, the great king summoned him for an urgent matter. His Highness won't be back for 4 days. Why don't you write a letter, and I'll find someone to deliver it to His Highness." Gong Chong and shook his head. "Forget it. 4 days isn't a long time. Let's wait for His Highness to come back." Xiao 11Z nodded obediently. Gong Chong and glanced at him and asked with a benevolent smile, "Your Highness went out with the Crown Prince Consort?" Xiao 11Z nodded vigorously. "Yes." "Ah!" Gong Chong and sighed deeply. Xiao 11Z wanted to ask him why he sighed, but he didn't dare to. After watching Gong Chong and leave, Xiao 11Z rubbed the back of his head, feeling a little confused. Emolien naturally didn't know that the great king had come looking for him right after he ran away with the beauty. The two of them rushed towards the mystic beast forest, and the little golden dragon's speed was naturally fast. Compared to when he rode the eagle to the mystic beast forest in Arbor, the time taken was shortened by at least 2/3. Seeing that little Tsunder's footwork was pretty good, Qiao Mu didn't make things difficult for Yan Xiaoqi's friend after that. The two of them set off early in the morning and stopped not far from the outskirts of the small base late at night. Seeing that it was getting late, and the base's gate was already closed, the two of them started a fire on the spot, planning to make do for the night. "Are you cold?" Arbor shook his head and leaned on her, feeling a little sleepy. "Spring, how can it still be cold?" With that, she curled up in his arms and said, "Looks like you won't be able to sleep well tonight." Emolien chuckled softly, hugged her and said softly, "You still owe me 3 kisses. Sleep after kissing." "No." Arbor drowsily spat out these 2 words, and it didn't take long for her to fall asleep. Emolien helplessly shook his head and took out a blanket from his inner world to cover her. He muttered to himself, "She falls asleep so quickly every time. I wonder if it's on purpose." The next morning, Arbor opened her eyes and sat up. She dropped the blanket draped over her and glanced sideways. She saw that he was busy cooking a pot with his back to her. "What are you cooking?" "You're awake." Emolien turned around and glanced at her with a smile. "You're in luck. I stewed ginseng black-bone chicken porridge for you today. Come and try it. It's been cooking for a long time." Chapter 12:21. Arbor hurriedly ran over and sat on a rock beside him. She took a spoon and poked it into the pot. After taking a bite, her eyes lit up. "It's delicious. Drink 2 more bowls." Emolien reached out and pinched her little cheeks. "I have to get you back." Arbor drank a few mouthfuls of porridge and glanced at him. She raised her hand to wipe her face. "How am I thinner?" "I'm about the same as before." Emolien laughed and shook his head. "You're too different. Your little chin used to be round, but now it's pointy." Qiao Mu stuck out her tongue at him and scooped up another small bowl. However, before she could take a sip, she saw an extremely fast figure flitting past them. The person reached out and scooped up the boiling pot of porridge into his arms, laughing loudly as he exclaimed, "Oh my! It smells so good! This old man hasn't had breakfast yet." Arbor held a small spoon and stared blankly at the little old man who suddenly appeared in front of her. The old man wasn't tall and was chubby. He wore a minister's hat on his head and a linen robe on his body. There was a straw rope tied around his waist. He looked a little out of place. Emolien glanced at the old man. When Arbor didn't see him, his face darkened slightly. "Who are you? Why are you stealing our food?" Arbor stood up with the spoon and looked at the old man in confusion. The old man had already started drinking. He didn't even mind the heat. He blew on the porridge like a reincarnated hungry ghost. He finished the big pot of porridge in no time. Light up. After he was done, his beady eyes were still staring at the half bowl in Arbor's hand. Arbor instinctively hugged her small bowl and couldn't help but ask, "What are you doing?" "Little girl, I'll make a bet with you. If you can protect that bowl of porridge in your hand, this old man will agree to one of your requests. With that, he flashed in front of her and reached out to grab the bowl of porridge in her hand. Jojo used the talisman. Whoosh! Arbor threw out a teleport talisman and instantly moved hundreds of meters away. The old man said with a laugh, "Little girl, you have some tricks up your sleeve." He had already appeared behind her and pressed down on her head. What a fast movement and speed! As Arbor threw out a teleportation talisman, he threw out 60 binding talismans to trap the old man. In just a few breaths of time, the old man laughed and broke out of the binding glyph formation. Amazing, amazing! He's not inferior to Mu Xingqian, who's known as the #1 genius of the talisman aristocratic family in the Divine Prefecture. While the old man was smiling, his moves were extremely fast. Every attack was aimed at the bowl in Arbor's small hand. The old man was about to snatch the bowl from her hands. In her panic, Darling Qiao threw her head back and gulped down the small bowl of porridge. After she was done, she threw the bowl on the ground and said angrily, "You didn't get it." The old man stopped with a dumbfounded expression. He stared blankly at her for a few seconds before suddenly laughing out loud. Emolienne saw this from the side, and the corner of her mouth couldn't help but curl into a smile. Okay. This old man is willing to accept his loss. What request do you want me to agree to? Emolienne quickly moved to Arbor's side, tugged at her small hand, and whispered a few words to her. Arbor looked at Emolienne blankly before replying, "My request is that you must unconditionally stand by my side and support me in the future." Actually, Arbor was also puzzled. She didn't understand why Emolienne would say this to her. Chapter 12:22. The old man glanced at Prince Mo and snorted. He found a rock and sat down. "Humph, you're obedient. You just said what I asked you to say. Sly little girl." The old man rubbed his round belly before turning to look at Emolienne. He said with a spurious smile, "All right then. This old man isn't someone who can't afford to lose. All right, do you two have any dry food? Give it to me." Although he had a lot of food with him, he didn't know how to cook. They had been hungry for 2 days. How miserable! Emolienne glanced at him and threw him a bag of wheat biscuits. He pulled his wife and walked towards the small base. The old man stood behind the two of them and looked at them meaningfully. He opened the bag and took a bite out of it. "Alas, I didn't expect that I, the third elder of the Divine Lands Presbyterian Academy, would be reduced to eating dry food in this shabby place," he muttered as he followed the two of them. He followed them at a steady pace, neither too far nor too close. Arbor felt that the old man didn't leave. She turned to look at him and tugged at Emolienne's hand. "Who is this old man? Why does he keep following us?" "Ignore him," Emolienne said lightly. He held her little hand and walked into the base openly. There was an idiot who wanted to make him pay the fee. Yes, he was thrown out by him. He should be massaging his old waist in the corner now. Arbor was familiar with this adventurer base. She pulled Emolienne all the way to the mission distribution center. She had made an appointment with the giant bear squad to buy all the primary herbs they dug up a month later. But it had been 2 or 3 days since the appointed date. She wondered if they were anxious. Arbor and Emolienne walked to the mission distribution center hand in hand. The closer they got to the place, the more crowded it was. There were many people there and they were making a lot of noise. The two couldn't squeeze in at first. They stood outside the crowd and couldn't see the sign of the mission distribution center. Arbor heard the voice of Gao Sheng, the captain of the giant bear squad, from the crowd. "We're not obstructing anyone. The herbs are piled up in the open space. No one usually goes there. Why are they taking up space?" "TSK, Captain Gao, you must be joking. That pile of herbs of yours is occupying the latrine pit but not shitting. How many days have they been there? You're really looking forward to that little girl coming to collect those medicinal herbs. Ha 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 ha." The captain of the Proud Hawk squad laughed mockingly at Gao Sheng as he hugged a gorgeous woman. "Maybe he's just teasing you." That's right. 1 cultivation coin for a low-level herb. How is that possible?" Although low-grade medicinal herbs also had the word medicine in them, to put it bluntly, they were really just grass. Ha 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 ha. There are so many in the Mystic Beast Forest, and you can have as many as you want. If you really purchase them like this, then the young lady's hard-earned capital will be gone. I think that girl is a liar. She won't come again. You're talking nonsense, Sister Gu shouted angrily. You're not her. So why are you making wild guesses about her? Maybe Miss Chow was delayed for a few days because of something. Delayed? Ha 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 ha. Only someone as naive as you would believe it. Maybe she took a peek and saw that you guys actually picked over 200,000 primary herbs. She was scared witless by your extravagance and ran away. Everyone roared with laughter. Chapter 12:23. Gao Sheng's face flushed slightly red. He opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. Could it be that the proud Eagle Squad's captain's crow's beak was spot on? Miss Chow saw that they greedily plucked over 200,000 stalks of medicinal herbs, and was so scared that she didn't want to come. But when they were plucking back then, they only thought that the more they plucked, the better. In fact, they didn't have to charge her 1 mystic coin per stalk. The plump woman, Hua Gu, spat at the proud Eagle Squad's captain. Scram, scram, scram. What does it have to do with you? This is our huge bear squad's business. You idle people really have too much free time. Isn't it because your trash piled up in the open space is in the way? That's right. If you don't take care of it by today, we'll have to help you take care of it. Ha ha ha. Everyone's mocking voices rang out, and they all looked at Captain Gao Sheng as if they were watching a good show. Gao Sheng gritted his teeth. You don't need to take care of it. We can do it ourselves. Captain. Suddenly, a melodious voice that seemed like the sound of nature landed in the ears of the huge bear squad members. They all turned their heads in disbelief, only to see a pair of exquisitely carved jade people standing outside the crowd. Their brows were drawn together like a painting as they stared fixedly at them. Sis Ji's eyes lit up when she looked over. Little Chow. The little girl forcefully kicked aside the proud Eagle Squad members blocking her way and extended a small paw, waving at them in a friendly manner. Gao Sheng's tears were about to fall. This little grand aunt finally appeared. Arbor trotted all the way to Captain Gao and extended a small paw. He stood on his tiptoes and patted Captain Gao's shoulder. Captain, I'm late. I was delayed by something earlier. You've been waiting for a long time. Not long, not long. Gao Sheng's current mood was like a completely different person from his earlier gloomy mood. Now, he was so happy that he wanted to fly. Captain. The little fellow looked up at him, but before she could speak, she was stopped by 2 slightly pleasantly surprised voices. Little Chow. Sis. Little Sixth Zhang and Princess Xiaomi ran over one after the other and circled around her, unable to restrain their joy. We finally waited for you. Ah! Arbor looked at the 2 of them, a trace of embarrassment appearing on his little face. You've been waiting for me here? These 2 slow-witted children, if she hadn't thought of returning to this small adventurer base in the Mystic Beast Forest, then wouldn't they have been weathered from waiting? Yes. The 2 nodded at the same time. Xiaomi's personal bodyguard, Gong Sun Lai, slowly walked over. Hearing this, he crossed his arms and said, Princess Mi said that you will definitely come out from the forest. No matter what, I have to stay here and wait for you. Sorry for making you guys worry, Arbor said softly. It's good to see that you're fine, Xiaomi said with a smile. Then, she lowered her voice and leaned closer to her. Oh right. Why did I hear that you picked up a phoenix egg? Is that true? Yeah. Arbor nodded. In the next instant, Xiaomi slapped him on the shoulder. Wow, your luck is too good. Where did you find it? Arbor pinched her sleeve. You might not believe it, but when I was walking on the road, it suddenly fell from the sky. Princess Xiaomi and Gong Sun Lai's bodyguard chuckled at the same time. What the fuck? This was really unbelievable. Chapter 12:24. Arbor speechlessly glanced at Princess Mi. I'll tell you about this later. After speaking, she turned to Gao Sheng and crisply called out, Captain! Captain Gao's face was overwhelmed by the favor. He always felt that every time the little girl called him Captain, It was especially familiar. Captain, Little Six and I want to join. Captain Gao, has the matter been resolved? A gentle voice came from the back of the group. When Arbor heard this nightmarish voice, the expression on her small face suddenly changed greatly. She abruptly turned her head and stared fixedly at the white-robed man walking over like a wolf. His entire body was covered in white clothes, making him appear very noble and unsullied. His gentle smiling face was brimming with a warm aura. No matter who saw it, they would feel that this person was very amiable and would be happy to get close to him. Heh, Fan Shoha, her big brother next door. Why are you here? A thin vine shot out from Arbor's sleeves and directly whipped toward Fan Shoha's face without any warning. Ah! Fan Shoha felt all the hair on his body stand on end, and he leaned to the side to avoid the attack. With a loud bang, the vine whip landed on a stool, directly whipping the stool into pieces. Arbor's figure had already rushed over like a little leopard. The wood spirit in her hand glowed with a faint green light, and she directly slapped it toward Fan Shoha's face. This slap was too heavy, and Fan Shoha felt that he might be disfigured by the little girl. He hurriedly activated a defensive mystic weapon to block it. As he dodged, he picked up a long sword and used it to block the little girl's wild bombardment of attacks. The little girl didn't fight in any order. Most of the time, she directly attacked with her small fists. After he dodged 2 or 3 steps, she suddenly stopped and actually smiled at him. This smile made all the hair on Fan Shoha's body stand on end. Previously, during the banquet, she had smiled at him like this and then used her killer move. Sure enough, when the little girl opened her hand, 5 streams of water drilled out from her palm and suddenly turned into 5 long snakes, rushing toward Fan Shoha without stopping. Fan Shoha turned pale with fright and immediately mobilized all the mystic energy in his body to open a defensive barrier. When the 5 streams of water hit the outer defensive barrier, the defensive barrier suddenly collapsed. Fortunately, he had used his own cultivation to form a defensive barrier, and the remaining water spirit energy did not immediately break his defense when it hit the defensive barrier. Fan Shoha gripped the sword in his hand and covered it with a wave of mystic energy. He swept it across and drew a half-arc, bang! The 5 streams of water immediately exploded. Just as he heaved a sigh of relief, he suddenly felt the soil under his feet loosen. His entire body was abruptly grabbed by a giant hand that flipped out from under the soil. He lowered his head in fear and looked down. The giant hand made of mud rolled up and slapped down on his head. Boom! This slap directly made Fan Shoha spit out a mouthful of old blood. With a bang, he fell flat on his face and ate a mouthful of mud. Everyone present was silent and didn't make the slightest bit of sound. However, their eyes were filled with disbelief as they stared blankly at the little girl in front of them. They were very clear about the strength of the Fan family's young master, but they didn't expect that he would be so easily slapped to the ground by the little girl. Chapter 12:25. Without waiting for the Fan family members to rush forward, Arbor appeared in front of Fan Shoha in a flash. The startled swan dagger instantly flew out of her conscious. With just a wisp of her spiritual perception, she quickly pressed it against Fan Shoha's neck. Still as useless as ever, Arbor paced 2 steps in front of him and glanced sideways at the few Fan family members who wanted to rush forward. She waved her hand at them and said, "If you dare to come forward, I'll slit open his neck right now and make him payu and spit out a lot of blood." The few Fan family members stared blankly at the young lady in front of them. They only felt that her current expression carried a hint of terror amidst her naivety. Even a little inexplicably morbid that she would do as she said. Everyone's hearts shrank. Fan Choming led the others to stand far away. He cupped his hands toward Arbor and said, "Crown Princess, how has my brother offended you?" Arbor glanced at him and said mildly, "Him? How has he offended me?" Fan Choming, "Why does he feel like he has nothing to say?" Cough, cough, cough. Fan Shoha, who was sprawled on the ground and beaten up by Crown Princess Dahai again, stared at Arbor with a slightly changed expression. Why did you? What? Whoosh. The sharp, startled swan dagger drew a red line of blood on Fan Choha's neck. If it had been a little deeper, his head might have fallen off his neck. Fan Choha was greatly alarmed, but he still maintained a big brotherly smile on his face. Only because he was nervous, his fingers were already curled up. Crown Princess. Emolien quickly walked to Arbor's side and pulled her into her arms, stroking the back of her head to comfort her. The desolate aura that this child exuded just now was heart-wrenching. There must be something wrong with this Fan Choha. Otherwise, Jojo would not be on the verge of losing control every time he saw him. Fan Choha, stay away from the huge bear squad. Never step foot in their midst. Otherwise, you will die without a burial ground. Do you understand? Xiao Mu turned her ice-cold small face over and indifferently gazed at that big brother next door. Fan Choha's heart suddenly shrank, but he still maintained a trace of calmness on the surface. He didn't dare to nod because there was still a startled swan dagger at his neck. Crown Princess, you must have misunderstood something. I'm here today to ask the giant bear squad for a small mission. Are all of you from the Fan clan good-for-nothings? Arbor looked at him coldly. You're not allowed to ask the giant bear squad for help. Withdraw your bullshit mission immediately. Also, get out of my sight immediately. I don't want to see you. This was really something that he didn't want to see. Fan Choha's hands, which were pressed against the side of his robe, clenched tightly and revealed a somewhat embarrassed smile. The Crown Princess has given a clear order. Choha does not dare to disobey. After saying that, he stiffened his neck and looked at the startled swan dagger at his neck from the corner of his eye. He walked stiffly to the table in the mission distribution center and quickly canceled the mission that he had just issued to the giant bear squad, paying a certain amount of penalty for breaching the contract. Arbor gave a rare, faint smile. That's good. In the future, don't let me see you sticking to the giant bear squad like a fly. Understand? Also, take good care of your own life. I'll be coming for you very soon. Fan Choha only felt that this Crown Princess's expression hid an infinite amount of strangeness. Chapter 1226. Arbor willed it, and the startled swan dagger flew back to her fingers with a whoosh. With a slight turn of the sharp dagger, it disappeared into her conscious with a whoosh. Fan Xiaoming hurriedly rushed forward to support Fan Choha, and led the Fan family away with their tails between their legs. Xiao Mu gazed coldly in the direction they left in and didn't say anything else. Her small head twitched in Emolien's embrace as she looked up at him. What is it? Emolien didn't let go of her, only lowering his head to smile at her. Are you feeling better? Arbor nodded. After Fan Choha left, she felt that the air here was much better. Every time she saw him, she would constantly recall that dark past. It was truly unbearable. Of course, she felt that this unbearable feeling would be resolved very quickly. Before she dealt with this Fan Choha, she had to understand one thing. Was this Fan Choha related to that Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture chief? Her previous pitiful marionette-like life was mostly bestowed upon her by the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture chief. She suspected that it was because she had opened her mystic meridians at the age of 16 that the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture chief sent Fan Choha, this smiling big brother, to her side. Thinking of this, darling Xiao couldn't help but shiver. Could it be like this? Or was she overthinking it? Jojo, can't you tell me? Emolien frowned slightly, reached out to hug her slender waist, and lowered his head to look at her. I can't tell you about Fan Choha. Xiao Mu gazed at him in a daze. Her pair of slightly morbid, pitch-black eyes that resembled an ancient well flickered, and she lowered her small head and said, I can say it. Later, I'll tell you all about the enmity between me and Fan Choha. Okay? Okay. While Emolien was pleased, his mood was also a little heavy. Then you have to tell me about that strange old man's identity. Emolien was stunned, then smiled and pinched her little face. Children shouldn't be so smart. You'll grow up faster if you're a little stupid. I'm going to be of marriageable age in half a month. I'm not a kid anymore. Arbor angrily slapped his hand away. You have to tell me. All right? Emolien smiled and nodded. As long as it's something you want to know, I'll tell you anything. That's more like it. The little girl looked at him with satisfaction. She suddenly remembered that she had been interrupted by that damned Fanshoha while she was talking to the captain. She quickly turned her little head around and said to Gao Shang in a crisp voice, "Captain, Little Six and I want to join the giant bear squad." Captain Gao was dumbfounded and flattered. He didn't know where to put his hands. Just now, the little girl's battle prowess was fully displayed. Such a strong little girl actually said that she wanted to pull her friend to join their unknown giant bear squad. What should he do? It seemed very inconceivable. Captain Gao looked at the little girl with a dumbfounded expression for a long time, then hurriedly nodded and said, Okay, little fellow, if you want to join our giant bear squad, we naturally welcome you. It's just that. Captain Gao scratched his head and said a little embarrassedly, Our giant bear squad isn't that strong. Have you thought about it? All the members of the giant bear squad fixed their gazes on the girl for a moment. In the early morning of this day, the giant bear squad was joined by two amazing members. Chapter 12:27. As for Fanshoha's group, they didn't realize that two yellow-spotted butterflies were tailing them the whole way after they left. After joining Huge Bear Squad, all the members surrounded the new member. Arbor and Little Sixth Zhang discussed enthusiastically and welcomed her incessantly. The Proud Hawk squad members who were originally watching the excitement felt bored and wanted to disperse. Arbor suddenly shouted, "Wait a minute! Were you the one who said that I was a swindler just now?" Arbor suddenly stood in front of the Proud Hawk squad captain. That captain had a tanned, old face with chapped skin from being exposed to the elements. But when he saw Arbor, he couldn't help but reveal a perverted expression. He took a step forward and pressed closer instead. "What? Does the little miss have some advice? What are you doing?" Everyone in Huge Bear Squad surrounded her in a huff, and the leader, Captain Gao, pushed the Proud Hawk squad captain away with a slap. "Stay away from our Xiao Xiao." Classmate M.O., who was blocked outside the encirclement by a group of burly Huge Bear Squad members, looked at his wife across the human wall, feeling extremely stifled. What to do if his wife was too popular? "I'm here to collect medicinal herbs right now." "Captain, how many medicinal herbs did our squad collect during this time?" There are all kinds of primary level medicinal herbs. But you don't need to give us 200,000. Here. Arbor handed Captain Gao a money pouch. "Here are 100,000 high-grade mystic currency. Keep it well." "What?" Everyone stared dumbfoundedly at this extravagant nouveau riche squad member, simply not daring to believe their eyes. 200,000 low-grade mystic currency and 100,000 high-grade mystic currency weren't on the same level. Just like low-grade magnetite, it was only suitable for mystic cultivators level 1 to level 4 to absorb, while high-grade magnetite could be absorbed by mystic cultivators level 12 and below. As for Arbor's level 14 cultivation realm, high-grade magnetite wasn't of much use to her. What she needed were supreme-grade magnetite. Supreme-grade magnetite mines were very rare on Seekong planet, so the production of mystic currency generally stopped at high-grade mystic currency. The captain of the Proud Hawk squad blushed, and he muttered, "I don't know where my luck came from." He was about to leave with his tail between his legs. Sis Gu stood in front of him with her hands on her hips. "Hey, are you going to swallow all the words you said to slander Xiao Qiao into your stomach? Do you see that?" Xiao Qiao gave our captain 100,000 high-grade cultivation coins and told him to keep it well. "Are you still calling her a liar now?" "Liar your sister. Have you ever seen a swindler pay a deposit?" Fine. Let's go." The captain of the Proud Eagle squad felt that he was in the wrong. He led his squad past the crowd and hurriedly ran away. Sister Goose sneered and scolded him for being a coward. Then, she ran to Arbor and happily said, "Xiao Qiao, there are so many medicinal herbs. Is it to help you transport them home?" "No need, I'll collect it myself." She simply took a new ebony purple storage talisman and followed Captain Gao and the others to an open space before throwing all the primary grade medicinal herbs inside. "I'll just take some time to slowly organize them," Arbor thought to herself. She turned and nodded her small head at them. "Thank you all very much. Captain Gao and the others repeatedly waved their hands. There was no need to thank them for this. This was what they should do in the first place. They all felt a bit embarrassed after receiving so much reward. Chapter 12:28. This nouveau riche teammate was so generous. It was obvious that he was helping them. Since there's nothing else, why don't we return to the city together tomorrow? Captain Gao thought it was a good idea. They had been out for almost a month, and their teammates were already exhausted. They should return to the city to recuperate. Besides, they had a lot of mystic coins on hand now, and they had basic living expenses. Thus, he nodded at Arbor and said with a smile, "All right, let's return to the city together." Xiaomi ran over with a smile. "Since that's the case, Gong Sun Lai and I will return to Southern Xiao Nation first. See you in a few days." Hence, Xiao Mu nodded. "Then be careful on your way back. Don't worry, I'm very powerful." Xiaomi assumed an attacking posture. Behind her, Gong Sun Lai immediately rolled his eyes at this princess. "All right, princess, don't show off blindly. You only have that one mystic skill. It's better not to take it out and make a fool of yourself." Arbor's mouth twitched. Didn't I hear that Southern Xiao Nation's king's famous mystic skill has 18 moves in one set?" Gong Sun Lai chuckled. "What are you laughing at?" Xiaomi angrily jumped to his side and kicked him. "Cough, I'm not laughing." Gong Sun Lai held back his laughter and explained, "Each of the great king's 18 mystic skills has a name. When it comes to Princess Xiaomi, the 18 moves are combined into one, and it's just that one move. Oh right, the first time she was tested, she even said with conviction that this is called not forgetting her roots. She started from the foundation and worked her way up step by step. The great king even praised her for her talent, and that she could take on a great responsibility and inherit the legacy of Southern Xiao Nation's royal family." Xiaomi coughed dryly and pretended to look around. She lowered her head and played with the corner of her clothes. 3 months later, the great king tested the princess for the second time and discovered that she was still using the same move. The great king's expression began to turn heavy, but he still praised her for practicing it well. She painstakingly practiced it just for this one move. "Xiaomi," Gong Sun Lai said with a faint smile. 3 months later, the great king tested her for the third time. When she was still using that one profound skill, and only knew how to use that one move to block the attacks of others. The great king fainted on the spot. Everyone laughed. Xiaomi glared at Gong Sun Lai and said, I'm just taking the essence, do you understand? Although it's only one move, it doesn't matter how many moves there are, only how good they are." Sister Gu said mockingly, "I didn't expect the renowned great king of Southern Xiao Kingdom to impart to you a set of 18 mystic skills. You actually wasted such a precious treasure?" Xiaomi angrily stomped her feet. "What are you laughing at? He's already practicing diligently, and he's even combining the 18 moves into one, extracting the essence and discarding the dregs." When Arbor heard this, he actually nodded his head in agreement. That's right, the number of profound skills has never been a factor. It's only a matter of how deep one's comprehension is. If I can combine the 18 moves into one move, then it will definitely be the best of the best. It will definitely be very powerful. Everyone was speechless. Ha ha ha. Gong Sun Lai grinned and nodded. She's so freaking powerful that she can't even beat a level 5 mystic cultivator who's one level lower than her. What was he supposed to do about this? Arbor patted her shoulder. "Continue practicing. You can do it. When you master the 18 moves into one, you'll definitely be unrivaled." The background music strangely turned into ha 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 ha. Chapter 12:29. After parting ways with the princess of the Southern Xiao Kingdom, Darling Qiao still followed beside Emolien with a strange expression and asked, "Why can't they stop laughing? Is it very funny?" Emolien hugged her small body with a smile and nodded. "It's funny." Darling Qiao was unconvinced. "I've only learned one type of archery technique, and there were originally 5 different archery techniques in it. Later, I mastered all of them into one type. Every time I shoot an arrow, the time limit can be shortened by at least 2/3. You even comprehended an explosive arrow archery technique on your own. When we practice, we adjust the cultivation technique according to the actual situation to comprehend deeper and achieve the goal of constantly striving for perfection. What's wrong with that? They shouldn't laugh at Xiaomi, darling, Xiao huffed. Emolienne was truly about to die from laughter at this darling. Darling, she's not you. Emolienne pressed his forehead against hers and laughed uncontrollably. What she said about mastering through a comprehensive study is complete nonsense. She only practiced one move out of the 18 moves, and she's the type that hasn't mastered it yet. Arbor was instantly speechless. Is that so? Emolienne nodded while holding back her laughter. She looked at her serious expression and said, "Do you think everyone is like you? Seeing a cultivation technique and mastering it on your own, condensing several moves into one. These all require talent and aptitude. Normal mystic cultivators just follow the cultivation technique and mystic technique. Why would they think so much like you?" Arbor nodded, seeming to understand. "So that's how it is. Still, they shouldn't laugh at her," Arbor said with a snort. Okay. Emolienne glanced at her with a smile. "Jojo, let's find a place to stay and have a good night's rest. We'll leave tomorrow. In any case, it's still early." Arbor nodded. Suddenly, she heard the poison-tailed butterfly Queen Xiao Xiao softly call her by her ear. "Master, master. Is there news?" Arbor asked with rapt attention. "No, master. The 2 butterflies that were sent out to scout for information were killed by someone. She couldn't enter Paradise Planet now, so she couldn't talk to Xiao Xiao face to face. Speaking of which, the 2 of them could only talk through spiritual awareness. She had asked Xiao Xiao to release those 2 yellow-spotted butterflies to keep an eye on Fan Xiuhe, but she hadn't expected him to be so cautious. "But I know where they died. Does Master want to go and take a look?" "Very close?" "Yes. It's in an abandoned wooden hut outside this small base." "All right, let's go and take a look." Emolienne had been watching her quietly. When she saw her look up at her, she smiled at her. "What's wrong? Let's go somewhere." 15 minutes later, Arbor and Emolienne arrived at an abandoned wooden house. When he pushed the door open and entered, there was no one around. Emolienne narrowed her eyes. There was the aura of a great spiritual master. His gaze fell on a piece of black muslin in the corner. It seemed like it was used to cover one's face. Arbor quietly looked at it. There were 2 small puffs of yellow powder on the ground. The yellow-spotted butterflies had probably been shattered by a palm strike after they were discovered. "There really is someone behind Fan Xiuhe," Arbor said coldly. "That person might even be a great spiritual master." He was extremely cautious and wouldn't even let go of the smallest butterflies. As long as he thought it was dangerous, he would destroy it with a pinch of his fingers. Arbor's eyes unconsciously outlined a middle-aged woman with a pair of gloomy eyes who covered herself behind a piece of black muslin. Chapter 12:30. She suddenly opened her eyes and involuntarily shuddered. Emolienne hastily pulled her into his embrace and stroked her back soothingly. "What's wrong, Jojo?" Arbor shook her head. It's nothing. There aren't any clues left behind here. Do you want to send someone to stay here and keep watch?" Arbor nodded. "The people who came into contact with Fan Xiuhe should be very cautious. I reckon that this place won't appear again. Let's go back. I'm a bit tired." Seeing that her expression was indeed a bit tired, Emolienne held her by the waist with heartache and drifted out of the shabby little wooden hut. After a good night's sleep, the next morning, after washing up and going out, she saw that the huge bear squad was already waiting outside. Little Sixth Zhang, dressed in black, stood nimbly and vigorously under the morning light. He turned to smile at her and nodded. Emolienne grabbed his wifey's hand and cast a sidelong glance at Little Sixth Zhang. When Captain Gao saw her come out, he immediately grinned, revealing his white teeth. "Xiao Qiao, are we going back by Flying Eagle?" "Okay." Arbor nodded. In any case, there were still 2 days left from the 4-day time limit that her mother had given them. They could still make it if they slowly ran back by Flying Eagle. Okay. The squad members walked outside in a hubbub. Arbor glanced out of the corner of her eye and saw that fatty and strange old man that she had previously encountered at the base's entrance. Knitting her brows slightly, Arbor looked up at Emolien. Seeing that his expression didn't change at all, she didn't say anything either. The two hopped onto the flying eagle and followed the huge bear squad back to the Mo Kingdom capital. Arbor sat on the eagle's back and gently leaned against Emolien's body, watching the eagle ascend into the sky as if it was dispersing into the clouds. Only then did she organize her thoughts and say softly, "Emolien, do you believe that miracles exist in this world? I once had a very long dream. In the dream, I died once. That kind of feeling was so real that you almost couldn't believe it." Following her dreamy voice, Emolien only felt that his breathing had also stopped. He completely didn't want to understand what his Jojo had died once meant. He didn't want to think about it. As soon as he thought about it, he felt like his heart had been sliced open by a knife and was about to be cut out. He suddenly tightened his arms around her waist. "What do you want to say, Jojo? I know that corpse puppets can erupt. I know that corpse puppets can grow. I know that everything will go according to the dream I had, and it will proceed slowly and in an orderly manner. It's just I don't want to go back to that dream. Emolien, did you know? In that dream, someone had been controlling my life the entire time. I'm like a puppet on a string, a puppet without any thoughts of its own. I'm being pointed here and there by others, living my own miserable life according to other people's thoughts." Emolien's pupils contracted as she recalled the pieces of information she obtained when she searched Lu Yiji's soul. Yes, someone had always wanted her Jojo to lead a good life. Someone had always been spying on her in the dark, wanting to destroy her hard-earned happiness. Him. How could he allow it? In that dream, I was captured by Fan Shoha. He broke all my limbs. Jojo. Emolien looked at her in horror, and his hands involuntarily hugged her waist tightly. It was as if he wanted to embed her deeply into his embrace at this moment and protect her firmly. Chapter 12:31. He asked me, "Arbor, why is your inner world different from other people's? Your cultivation level is clearly lower than mine, so why is your inner world bigger than mine?" He used some small hammers and nails to hit me all day and night, studying my inner world, trying to find out my secret. Jojo. Emolien hugged her tightly, hugging her slightly trembling body. "Don't be afraid. That person will never hurt you again. Because I'm here." Emolien leaned over and rubbed his head against the back of her furry head. "I won't allow anyone to hurt a single hair on your head." Arbor turned his head and looked at him with a slightly dazed gaze. He nodded and said softly, I know that it's just a dream, and it won't happen. But sometimes, I feel as if those things are happening to me, as if I'm in the same situation. Every time I see those enemies in my dreams." When Xiaomu recited the enemies in her dreams, her eyes would flicker with specks of starlight. "I just want to stab them to death, one stab at a time. I won't let Fan Shoha die so easily." Arbor looked at Emolien and asked softly, "Don't you think that this version of me is very scary?" Emolien shook his head heavily. "I don't think so. I just feel that this version of you makes my heart ache." He held her little hand and pressed it against his thumping heart. He sighed softly. "Jojo, it hurts here when I hear you say this. It doesn't matter if it's a dream or not." He reached out and cupped her little face. Suddenly, he lowered his head and kissed her lightly on the lips. "All of this is in the past. It won't happen to you again. I swear that I'll use my life to protect you, my Jojo, my love." He murmured softly and hugged her in his arms. Unknowingly, the two's fingers were tightly intertwined. Even when the afternoon sun shone on them, they didn't relax at all. That fat old man is the third elder of the Academy of Elders in China. He's here to find me. Emolien held her little hand and said mildly, "No matter what happens in the future, Jojo, we won't be separated. Okay?" Xiaomu's mind was a bit fatigued after digging into the secrets buried deep in her heart with him. She had already drifted into dreamland, as though she couldn't muster up any energy to continue the conversation. Emolien saw that she was about to sleep, so he put the matter of the third elder in China aside. He raised his hand to caress her smooth forehead and gently planted a kiss on it. He murmured softly, "Go to sleep. Everything will be fine when you wake up." This was a kind of mental exhaustion, not because she wanted to sleep. It was as if, after saying all this, she had walked through endless darkness and was finally pulled back from hell with great difficulty. Right now, she especially wanted to sleep comfortably under the sun and the warm sky. The cries of eagles glided by. The war eagles mounted by the huge bear squad flew one by one across the clear and comfortable sky, flying in the direction of the Emo Kingdom capital. Arbor's lips curled up slightly. She nuzzled against Emolien's chest and adjusted to a suitable sleeping position. His heartbeat was strong and powerful, like a lullaby, urging her to fall into a defenseless sleep. It seemed that with him by her side, she felt that she could have no misgivings. Chapter 12:32. His vision was hazy, as if he was looking at things through a thin layer of mist. The second young master stumbled as he parted the bead curtain strung together by golden beads. He stared blankly at a pot of begonia blooming beautifully on the shelf, somewhat lost in thought. There was a spotlessly white walnut inlaid bed in the bedroom, as well as the extremely familiar-looking brush, ink, paper, and inkstone on the desk next to it. An unfinished pot of hot tea was steaming with white smoke. Why did all of this look so familiar? Outside the beaded curtain, there seemed to be someone talking on the other side of the screen. The second young master moved closer. When he saw that hazy and familiar figure under the floating white veil, it was as if something had struck his heart. He was completely stunned. This back view. Why was this back view so similar to him? He only heard a soft voice say with a chuckle, "Exine, don't tell me you've really fallen in love with that woman and want to marry her. Don't forget who you are. Your father will never allow you to marry such a good-for-nothing woman. If you want to marry, shouldn't you marry a girl from an aristocratic family like me? That woman is of no help to you at all." When the second young master heard that woman's words through the thin white veil, he didn't know why, but his fists actually clenched tightly. "Tiske." A disdainful voice sounded. The second young master suddenly widened his eyes and shot a glance in that direction like lightning. Where was he? Was he in a dream? Why did it feel like he was actually there? It was as if he was looking at himself from his previous life and talking to someone. "Xian, say something. You're thinking too much." He heard his own voice faintly transmitted through the floating white veil. His current mood became very perturbed and complicated. He took a step forward, as if wanting to rush over and stop himself from saying what he was going to say next. However, it was as if he was frozen in time and space, trapped in a small space. He could only look at them, but couldn't go forward to touch or stop them. "Don't say it. Don't say it anymore." The second young master inexplicably felt as if his heart was about to be squeezed. It was as if he was looking at himself in his previous life and realized that if he continued to say those heartless words, it would cause something irreversible. "If it were you, would you marry a cripple with 4 limbs as your wife?" The cold voice continued. "She is just a little pet that I raised. She's a pet. Of course, I'll tease her when I'm happy. When I'm unhappy, I'll just ignore her. Just wait and see. She will obediently call me master in the future." The woman giggled. Her laughter was like a demonic sound that pierced into his ears. The second young master looked at everything in front of him with a blank expression. He saw someone push out a wooden wheelchair from behind a long cabinet. The wheelchair rolled along, as if every step was stepping on the tip of his heart, causing his eyebrows to shrink slightly in pain. He heard the woman's laughter. She said mockingly, "Arexen, your little pet heard what you said." He could clearly see the subtle changes in his previous life's expression under the moonlight. When he wanted to rush over and take a look at the person who had lowered her head and curled herself up in the wheelchair, it was as if he stepped on empty air and his whole body fell down. Chapter 12:33. He instantly woke up from the soft couch and straightened his body. His forehead was covered in cold sweat as he stared at the pitch-black night. The thin blanket covering his stomach slowly slid to the ground. Was that a dream? Why did it feel so real? Omega Kotoku got up from the soft couch. His body swayed slightly and he almost bumped into the cabinet at the side. He pressed his swollen head and leaned against the window frame. He took a breath of the cool air outside and his fingers couldn't help but curl up. Who was that person in the wheelchair? Why did he give him an indescribable sense of familiarity? Why did he make his heart tremble in pain? Master. Wang Cheng's voice came from below the window. He didn't seem to understand why his master would run to the window to get some fresh air in the middle of the night. The second young master didn't pay attention to him. Instead, his gaze was fixed on the distant dark void. It was as if there was another him coldly watching him. After Arbor returned home, under his mother's exhortations, he finally behaved properly for several days. For her coming-of-age ceremony, the entire Chow family was as busy as a spinning top. From the guest of honor to the assistant, not a single person could be missing. She was the only one who had nothing to do. From time to time, she would check on second uncle and brother Xiaohu's injuries. Other than that, there weren't any major issues. The two of them woke up the day after she left for the small base. Now, their injuries were gradually recovering. However, whenever Zhou Yuan of the Zhou family was mentioned, they would constantly curse him as a little bastard. At that time, the Zhou family detained eldest Aunt Xiao Wenxiu and cousin Pu Rulin at home. That day, father brought De Yuan to their house. Without saying a word, the two sides started fighting. De Yuan perfectly threw the two 11th-layer body cultivators of the Zhou family away and gave them a good beating. Father rescued eldest aunt and her daughter. When he saw their miserable state, it was said that the siblings, uncle and nephew, hugged each other and cried on the spot. That little bastard Zhou Yuan was still cursing on the side. He actually accused cousin Pu Rulin of not being a woman. Infuriated, father immediately asked Governor Pang Dehai to come forward and divorce cousin Pu Rulin and Zhou Yuan on the spot. When Arbor heard his second uncle talk about this, he couldn't believe his ears. She understood her father too well. He was an indecisive and soft-hearted person. How could he possibly be so resolute as to have her cousin and Zhou Yuan divorce on the spot? She did not know where this Zhou Yuan had come from to be able to anger her father to this extent. He could also be considered a talent. His cousin was also a strong-willed person. At first, his father had planned to bring the orphans and widows back to live with him, but his cousin was unwilling. Eldest aunt had a small house on Hualing Street, which was secretly bought by the mother and daughter a few years ago. After leaving the Zhou family, Pu Rulin stayed with her eldest aunt, Xiao Wenxiu, in the residential house on Hualing Street. From second uncle's words, it was likely that Zhou Yuan felt that he had been forced by his wife's uncle to divorce his wife dejectedly. After thinking about it, he felt that he had lost face. Thus, every 2 or 3 days, he would find people to cause trouble on Hualing Street, causing cousin Pu Rulin and eldest aunt to be unable to rest in peace. Arbor watched as second uncle swallowed a pill and handed him a bowl of water to drink. Second uncle, your body has just recovered. Being angry will harm your body. Be careful. Jojo, you haven't seen that little bastard's face. If you saw it, I guarantee that you would go up and give him 2 slaps. That's right. I hate that there was someone who stopped us that day. Otherwise, I would have beaten him to death long ago. Chapter 1234. Xiao, who also said angrily, "That's a person who can't get any more despicable." Okay. Arbor didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he comforted brother Xiao Hu, watching him swallow the pill. Then these past 2 days that Zhou Yuan still brought people to Hualing Street to cause trouble? Arbor asked curiously. How can he not cause trouble? When can he not cause trouble? Every day he comes barking like a mad dog. Xiao Hu angrily slammed the table. Wait until I recover. I'll definitely give him a good beating. Isn't he going to marry some Gao family's daughter? Why does he still have the time to make trouble for cousin? Arbor couldn't help but ask as he had the little girl come in and clean up the medicine bowl. That's right. That hateful guy clearly abandoned his wife to climb up the social ladder and marry the Gao family's daughter, Gao Chichi. He even keeps slandering cousin for having an affair. I've never seen someone as despicable as him. From the father and son's conversation, Arbor understood that this was a big scumbag. I'll have Xiao Yao go take a look later. It's fine, you two should rest first. She herself had been grounded by her mother, and before her hairpin ceremony, her mother wouldn't allow her to go out as she pleased. However, sending that quick-witted girl, Xiao Yao, to take a look was still feasible. Xiao Hu's eyes lit up, and he casually said, "Tell Xiao Yao to be careful. Although those two 11th layer body cultivators are injured, they're still quite powerful." Arbor turned his head and carefully looked at Brother Xiao Hu. "Brother Xiao Hu, wait until you recover. I'll refine 2 mystic breakthrough pills for you to take. You can properly raise your cultivation." Xiao Hu immediately beamed with joy. Good, good. Little sister, I actually feel that my body has completely recovered. How about in 2 days? Arbor looked at his anxious expression and couldn't help but shake his head. Let's talk about it after you recover. There's no rush. Turning his head, he saw second uncle anxiously looking at him from the side. He couldn't help but laugh. Second uncle, I'll refine 2 body tempering pills for you. Okay. Second Uncle Chow answered with a grin. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't envious when she saw her elder brother soar all the way to a level 9 mystic cultivator after taking 2 mystic breakthrough pills. Second Uncle Chow was grinning from ear to ear at the thought that he would be able to make some progress soon. After Arbor left the father and son's ward, he instructed Xiao Yao to check out the situation at Hualing Street. The little fellow kicked off her shoes and lay down on the couch by the window. Not long after, she saw a pale white figure come in through her window with a whoosh. He pounced on her side and kissed her affectionately. Annoying. Arbor reached out a finger and tapped the guy's forehead. Prince Mo looked at her innocently and reached out to grab her finger. Jojo, I've been chatting with those old guys for half a day after the morning court. I haven't even had a mouthful of hot porridge yet. I'm so hungry. How about having Chioju cook some noodles for you? MHM? MHM. Prince Mo nodded and leaned against her as he whined. Jojo, my head hurts. Arbor wordlessly crawled to his side and pulled his head into her embrace. She rubbed his head with her fingers. If my mother sees you like this, she'll definitely be stunned. Prince Mo nudged his head in her embrace. How am I? You look like a rascal. Mo Lien burst into laughter. She flipped over and pulled out a small rectangular box from her sleeve. This is your husband's present for you. Hurry and open it. What is it? Arbor opened the box. Chapter 1235. She saw a phoenix hairpin with flowing light lying there quietly. The hairpin was inlaid with a row of resplendent gems, with a gentle luster. This is a defensive spirit tool. Arbor didn't show it on her face, but she was extremely touched inside. How long ago did this guy make this hairpin for her? He made it himself for her to wear at her coming-of-age ceremony. For your coming-of-age ceremony. Emolien propped up her chin with one hand and tilted her head to look at her with a smile. I'm fine with it, right? Humph. Arbor gave him a sidelong glance. He narrowed his beautiful phoenix eyes and looked at her. Wife, your husband is so good to you. Don't you plan to come over and kiss your husband? Xiao Mu placed the hairpin inside the slender box. Suddenly, she hugged his head and kissed his face with a smack. Prince Mo looked at her with silly amusement. Jojo, look good. Come here and let me hug you. Idiot. Arbor glanced at him, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, and then pulled him up. Coincidentally, they saw the maid Choju enter with a tray and curtsied to the two. Arbor took the bowl of hot noodle soup and handed it to the crown prince. Here, you can leave after eating. If mother comes later and sees you here, let's see how you explain yourself. Then I won't be able to finish it in my lifetime. Prince Mo picked up the noodles with his chopsticks and ate, sneaking glances at her. Arbor glanced at him speechlessly. Oh right, didn't you ask me about Sikong Fuling before? What happened to her? Prince Mo almost choked on the noodle soup. Arbor hurriedly took a brocade handkerchief from the side and wiped it. What are you doing? Nothing. Prince Emo glanced at Arbor rather guiltily and pretended to ask casually, Are you good friends with her? Of course not. I snatched her glacial star sand, so she must hate me to death in her heart. If we meet again, it's already good enough that we don't fight. If we fight, I won't go easy on her. That's good, that's good. Prince Emo grinned and picked up a few more noodles in a good mood. Arbor looked at him suspiciously. Are you hiding something from me? I'm fine. I'm fine. Emo. Lotus. Prince Emo turned his head to look at his little emperor baby, and immediately admitted defeat. Okay, I'll tell you, but you can't be angry. Previously, when I flew to the Mystic Beast Forest to look for you, I couldn't find you. I smelled your scent on Seekong Fulling's body, so I captured her and brought her back. Arbor's eyes widened. Why did you capture her? Arbor glared at him angrily. Don't tell me you caught her because she's wearing too little fabric and wanted to feast your eyes on her. What? Why would you think that? Emolien pulled him into his embrace and said exasperatedly, Why would I look at her? She's so ugly and can't even compare to one of your toes. Why would I look at her? Arbor's eyes swiveled. Then why did you capture her? I interrogated her about your whereabouts, but she wasn't willing to say anything at first. What she said after that was all lies, so I threw her into the dungeon. After that, I forgot about her. Arbor's mouth twitched. Then she's still in the dungeon now? Should be. Prince Emo simply didn't remember this person after that. Arbor silently lit a candle for Seekong Fulling. Then when should I go see her? Chapter 1236. Wait until after your coming-of-age ceremony. Emolien reached out to fix her hair. It's been so long anyway, she should be used to it. Arbor couldn't help but want to laugh. Could it be possible to get used to this dungeon? No need. Since I don't have anything to do tomorrow, I'll sneak out. Mother won't notice. Let little sister keep a lookout for me. Emolien's eyes lit up, and he immediately hugged his wife without letting go. He smiled and nodded. Okay. Then let's go swim by the lake and listen to some songs or something. Bah! Arbor pushed him and snorted. Forget about swimming by the lake and listening to songs. If a mutated fish monster suddenly appeared in the middle of the swim, that wouldn't be wonderful. How could there be such a coincidence? Emolien hugged his wife and dawdled. Just for a while, I'll send you home in 2 hours. Xiao Mu poked his head with her finger. You're so nosy. Just as they were talking, Xiao Yao returned. As soon as she entered, she angrily bowed to Arbor and Emolien. Your Highness, Crown Princess, I've already asked around. That Zhou Yuan, it's just as Second Master said. He's a big slut through and through. He went to make trouble for Miss Pooh again today. Fortunately, the guards that Master left there helped to block him. The two really clashed, and Miss Pooh sprained her hand. Is it serious? It's all right. I left some medicine for Miss Pooh. You should be fine after 2 days. Xiao Yao couldn't help but say angrily. But that damn slut keeps making trouble for her. If this goes on day after day, I don't know how Miss Pooh will live. Xiao Mu creased her brows. Go over there again tomorrow. Give Pang Dehai my visitation notice and have him go with you. Arrest all the troublemakers. After 2 or 3 times, no one will dare to make trouble again. Is this feasible, miss? Of course it's feasible. Arbor smirked and said, Have Lord Pang lock them up in jail and find a few people to scare them. Okay, Xiao Yao will do it tomorrow. After Arbor sent that annoying guy away with great difficulty, he began to make the devil grass detoxification pill. The next day, Arbor brought the little girl Jolin over and had her stay in his room while he slipped out of the house. After being cooped up at home for several days, Arbor jumped over the back wall with light steps and saw Prince Emo standing there with a smile in his white casual clothes. Arbor jogged over and naturally reached out to hold his arm. I've been waiting for a long time. Not too long. Emolien winked at her. How was it? Did Mother find out that you slipped out? It's fine. I'll let little sister block it for me. Arbor held his hand and said, Let's go to the dungeon to see Sikong Fuling first. This Sikong Fuling, I've checked her identity. She's quite special. She's actually the holy maiden of the demonic sect. Mo Lien stroked his chin and said, previously, when she was in prison, she even used a flute, and she really almost escaped. That flute is the nightmare demonic flute. Back at the small base, I almost fell for it. The two rode back to the Eastern Palace, whispering to each other as they hurried in the direction of the dungeon. Just as they stepped through the dungeon doors, they heard a heart-wrenching shout. I demand to see your boss. Why am I locked up here all day? I've told him everything. Why won't you let me go? Chapter 1237. Sikong Fuling. Arbor's voice suddenly drifted into her ears from the other side of the wooden prison door. At first, she thought she was hearing things, but in the end, when she turned to meet her gaze, she couldn't resist pouncing over. Just as she grabbed hold of two wooden pillars, she was struck by a bolt of lightning and retracted her hand. She shouted angrily, "It really is you! Stoic face! Stoic face! Hurry and let me out! Let me out!" The little stoic looked at a certain person who was hopping around angrily from across a row of prison cells. She then turned to look at the crown prince who was strolling over slowly. "Let her go! Let her go!" At the crown prince's command, two youths in black immediately ran over. They nimbly walked to the stone wall and pressed a switch. The prison door in front of Sikong Fuling abruptly sprang open. She hastily flew out with a whoosh and stood in front of Arbor and Mo Lien. "I already said I didn't grab Stoic Face. Are you sick in the head? Locking me up in the dungeon for so many days. Fuck." His Highness the Crown Prince casually threw a set of black robes at Sikong Fuling's face. "So ugly. Hurry and put on your clothes. It's useless to show anything when you're so ugly." The Crown Prince gruffly grabbed Arbor's small hand and turned to walk outside. "Jojo, I didn't look at her. Ugly." Arbor's mouth twitched, and he suddenly felt a bit of sympathy for Sikong Fuling. She was also quite unlucky. She didn't know if she was blind when she was walking, but she actually ran into a willful and unreasonable guy like the Crown Prince. Sikong Fuling cursed all 18 generations of the Mo family's ancestors and bellowed angrily behind them, "Give me back my flute." Running into this pair of freaking fiends was truly her 8 lifetimes worth of bad luck. The nightmare demonic flute fluttered through the air and landed on Sikong Fuling's outstretched, fair hand with a whoosh. Simply infuriating. "Stoic Face, hey, Stoic Face." Sikong Fuling wrapped herself in that black robe and jumped in front of Arbor to block her path. "Facial paralysis. Let me ask you, where exactly did you run off to after we separated that time? Do I know you that well? Why are you asking so many questions?" Arbor glanced at her indifferently. Startled, Sikong Fuling curled her lips and said, "You heartless Stoic Face. After all, we've eaten wild game, gnawed on dry rations, and spent the night together. To think that she was worried that something would happen if she wandered around the forest blindly." Sikong Fuling thought of something and suddenly waved her hand in front of her eyes. "Eyes? I can see it." Arbor's face was expressionless, but his heart couldn't help but tremble slightly. Could it be? During the period when she was possessed by the disaster-courting talisman, she even met Sikong Fuling? What eyes? What happened to your eyes? Mo Lien heard some clues and reached out to hold Xiao Qiao's little hand, looking at her with a puzzled expression. When he caught this little fellow, Arbor had actually already recovered half of her 5 senses. "I don't know what she's talking about." Arbor pulled her little face with a solemn expression. No one could tell that her little stoic expression was crumbling under her stoic face. What a joke! She wouldn't tell anyone that she had lost her 5 senses like an idiot. "You don't remember? You're the one who doesn't remember." Arbor waved her little hand at her. "Hurry up and leave since I'm letting you go. If you don't want to leave, then go in and stay for a while longer." Sikong Fuling wanted to slap the Stoic Face to death. "I'm hungry. Don't tell me you won't give me food after imprisoning me for so long." Chapter 1238. Arbor glanced at her reluctantly. Lightning. Lightning immediately appeared beside her and bowed respectfully. Crown Princess. Take this person to Morning Cloud Restaurant for a free meal. Arbor pointed at Sikong Fulling. Then let her go. Don't eat too much, it's a waste of food. Sikong Fulling. Dadamolien suppressed a smile and held the little fellow's hand as they walked out of the Eastern Palace's small dungeon. He looked down at her with a smile. Wifey, your husband sees that the weather is clear today. Let's go to Juzi Lake to play. Your husband will send you back. How about that? Arbor pinched his face. What if your mother-in-law finds out? Emolien pursed his lips and leaned over to whisper in her ear. If mother-in-law finds out, you'll take the blame. Qiao Mu's eyes abruptly widened. You. Emolien chuckled and held her little hand as they ran. I have to maintain a good image in front of mother-in-law, so I'll have to trouble my wifey to take the blame. Pooh! Arbor spat at him and rolled her eyes at him. Mother even asked me to stay at home and embroider a small item for you. A brocade pouch. Emolien's eyes lit up and he looked at her happily. Jojo wants to embroider it for me? Arbor shook her head. No. Then what did you embroider? Emolien started to imagine and she looked intoxicated. Did you embroider something on my clothes? Arbor pursed her lips. Do you think you can still wear your clothes after I embroider something on them? Don't worry, your husband doesn't mind at all. Emolien looked at her happily. Jojo, just tell me, what did you embroider? Arbor strode forward quickly and didn't even look at him out of the corner of her eye. Jojo kept him in suspense. She definitely wanted to give her husband a big surprise. Emolien's figure flashed, and he arrived beside her. He held her small hand and said, Chow chow. No matter what you embroider, I like it. Arbor glanced at him and coughed lightly. I embroidered a flower. When Emolien heard this, he immediately looked at his baby in surprise. Jojo, you can embroider. Arbor. A lotus flower, Arbor said seriously. It's for you. Emolien. He suddenly had a bad premonition. What was going on? Embroidered on the pouch? Arbor shook his head. I told you it's not a purse. Sleeves? Arbor still shook his head. Emolien asked carefully. Then where did you embroider it? Of course it's on your underwear. Arbor glanced at him with a disdainful look that said, You're so stupid. The corners of Emolien's mouth twitched. My underwear? Good. Good. I don't have to wear it to meet people. Why are you so stupid? Arbor lifted his little hand, stood on tiptoe, and hit him hard on the head. Emolien. Following his baby's downward gaze, young Master Emo looked down and suddenly exclaimed, Underwear! Qiao Mu nodded solemnly and gave a rare explanation. Mom said that she wanted to embroider a personal item for you. I thought about it and could only embroider a flower on your underwear. Emolien. You don't like it? Darling Qiao frowned and looked sternly at the man who didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Emolien hurriedly shook his head like a rattle drum. I like it very much. Chapter 1239. I embroidered a lotus flower. The little fellow emphasized again. Mother said I'm talented. It's my first time embroidering, but my embroidery looks pretty decent. Darling Qiao felt exceptionally proud when she mentioned this. Her mother also said that her needles were especially steady and that the things she embroidered were also quite exquisite. She beamed with joy and told her to practice this skill more. Her silver needles were used to kill people, not for embroidering. I embroidered a lotus flower on all of your underwear and even used different colored threads to embroider it. White, red, yellow, and green, there's everything. Do you like it? Emolien suppressed her laughter and nodded seriously. She held her daughter's small hand and gazed at her with infatuation. Darling, you're so good to me. I really, really like it. Huifeng, who was hiding in the shadows, had long squatted down from laughing. Fuck, Crown Princess, did you come here to be funny? What white, yellow, blue, and green? You probably only know how to embroider one kind of flower, the lotus flower, right? Moreover, He felt that his master had a talent for comedy. As expected, this couple was destined to be a family of oddballs. Arbor's eyes curved, and he nodded in a slightly better mood. I knew you'd like it. When I'm skilled at embroidering, I'll embroider your outerwear. Okay, okay, okay. Emolien was overjoyed and nodded repeatedly. Embroider anywhere is fine. What color of lotus do you like? Black. I also like dark ones. Upon hearing this, Xiaomu nodded and said, Dark is good. Dark heart suits you. Emolien. Strange. Why did she feel like these words didn't seem to be praising her? Huifeng, who was laughing so hard that he was slapping his thigh in the shadows, suddenly discovered a wisp of medicinal power shooting toward him. Huifeng hastily rolled on the ground to avoid it and cried out, Wah! The medicinal power instantly pervaded his entire body. Huifeng had a bitter expression and coughed repeatedly from choking. Your Highness, what kind of medicinal power did you use on this subordinate? Don't you like to laugh? Why don't you stay here and laugh for 4 hours? The crown prince said coldly and left with Xiao Qiao. He tossed the dumbfounded Huifeng to the ground. Not long after, the secret guards of the Eastern Palace discovered that their leader was standing at the entrance of the small dungeon, laughing non-stop like a fool. The two of them left the Eastern Palace, and together they rode the same horse to Zhuzi Lake behind Fu Mountain. You really arranged a small boat. Arbor's eyes lit up. That's right. I've already said that such a spring day with hundreds of flowers blooming is especially suitable for a lake tour. Emolien reached out and hugged her waist. With a leap, they jumped lightly onto a small boat. The small boat slowly drifted into the river. The lake water was dark green. A few days ago, you refused to go back with me and insisted on staying here to cultivate. Emolien snorted. Do you still remember? Arbor shook her head very sincerely. Emolien pinched her small face. Scoundrel, you worried me to death. Arbor took out a small bottle from her sleeve and handed it to her. This is a bottle of antidote pills. Carry it with you and it can cure thousands of poisons. It's a new one that I made recently. For poisons on the level of the devil flower, 1 pill can cure them. Jojo, you were worried about me. Emolien scooped the little fellow into her arms and rubbed her chin against her small head. Don't worry, I'm fine. The poison has already been cured. Arbor took the opportunity to check his pulse and turned to glance at him. Chapter 1240. You don't have anything to hide from me about your body condition, do you? She looked at the man with a serious expression, as if she would bite him to death if he dared to hide anything from her. Emolien quickly shook his head and lowered his eyes as he replied, No. Arbor raised her small hand and patted Emolien's head as if she was petting a puppy. That's good. Emolien pulled her hand down and laughed helplessly. Jojo, in this situation, why are we talking about poison? Shouldn't we be drinking tea and chatting happily? Arbor poured him a cup of tea, then looked at him and smiled. Husband, please have some tea. Emolien's eyes moved, and he reached out to take the teacup with a smile. Wife, it's rare that you don't have to cultivate, and I've thrown away all the trivial matters. Today we... Bam! Suddenly, a loud sound came from the lakeside, abruptly interrupting Emolien's words. The two of them stood up hand in hand and looked towards the lakeside. In the distance, they saw a group of people gathered there, and only saw a crowd of people moving about. Did we really encounter some fish monster? Emolien thought of what Jojo had said before, and couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. This little guy couldn't have jinxed it, right? It's fine, it's fine. Everyone, disperse. It's fine. A young man's voice came from afar. Wow, it's an alchemist refining pills by the lakeside, and his furnace exploded. Are you an alchemist from the Alchemy Guild? It's actually someone from the Alchemy Guild? Wang Yoji. A familiar voice fell into Arbor's ears. She looked from afar and saw 2 familiar people from the Alchemy Guild. It's them. Emolien also nodded. At this time, he naturally saw the 2 people who had squeezed into the crowd. It was Alchemy Guild's Master Huafeng and the old-fashioned girl, Chun Huiran. The young man who had blown up the lakeside into a deep pit, and a piece of the embankment was slightly tilted, appeared in front of everyone with a face that was blackened by the explosion. You bastard. Chun Huron's voice drifted over with the wind. I already told you not to casually refine pills outside. The guy who blew up his furnace every day and had to refine pills every day couldn't help but throw the face of the Realdan Alliance outside. I just happened to obtain a new pill formula in the past 2 days. All right. Let's talk when we return to the Alchemy Guild. Master Hua Feng shook his head and turned to look at Wang Yoji. It was a good thing for this young man to work hard, but after 3 years of hard work, he couldn't even make a single successful elixir, and his furnace exploded every day. Was it really suitable for such a talent to stay in the Alchemy Guild? Fortunately, the triennial alchemy competition was just around the corner. When the time came, those who couldn't even make a single pill would be kicked out of the Alchemy Guild. Grandmaster Hua, please give me another chance. The young man hugged Grandmaster Hua's leg with tears flowing down his cheeks, causing the onlookers to sigh with emotion. Being an alchemist was also quite tough. He was despised by his seniors for exploding his furnace in alchemy, and he had psychological pressure himself. Alas, he still had to take the test of the competition every 3 years. If his alchemist level didn't improve for 2 consecutive years, he might be kicked out of the Alchemy Guild. It was hard to do anything. Emolien pulled Arbor back to sit down and said with a bored face, "How dare he come and disturb us for no reason? He can refine pills anywhere, but he came to the lakeside. He might have his own reasons." Chapter 1241. Arbor thought for a moment and coughed lightly. For example, because his furnace often explodes, he needs to be near a water source to ensure his safety. Otherwise, if it burns up, he won't have anywhere to hide. Emolien. What kind of weirdo is this? You mean, he originally planned to jump into the lake once his furnace explodes? Arbor nodded his head. Emolien couldn't help but laugh out loud. Reaching out, he pulled the little fellow over and fed her the warm tea. Forget it, let's ignore those idle people. We finally managed to steal half a day of leisure time. Why don't you accompany your husband and have a good chat? HM? Darling Chow's little face was wooden. Swallowing half a mouthful of tea, she looked up at him. These few days, I've been very idle every day. Emolien's eyes brightened. Then how about I come to visit you every day? If I say no, can you not come? Emolien hurriedly shook his head. No. She couldn't be bothered with him. Arbor cast a glance at him. The two of them gently swam along with the lake water, talking about all sorts of things for who knows how long. He said that he would send her home after touring the lake for 2 hours, but in the end, he carried her for 4 hours. By the time he stealthily sent her back, the sky was already dark. Her little sister was sitting in her room with her little mouth pouted. Seeing her return, she didn't even glance at her. Liar. He said that he would be back in an hour, but in the end, he let her pretend for more than 4 hours. She was bored to death. When Arbor saw that his little sister was angry, he hurriedly took out a lot of pastries and snacks from his inner world and went over to coax her for a while. Foodies were very easy to coax. After a while, she couldn't maintain that stern face and was beaming with joy. Chow Lin happily ate the food she gave her. As she ate, she said, Elder Sister Lee came to visit you today. Not long after you sneaked out, you almost let the cat out of the bag. Mother found out that you weren't in the room." Arbor stared blankly. Elder Sister Lee? In her memory, there seemed to only be that. The third miss of Deputy Minister Lee's family, Li Xiu-yi? Yes, that's her. Luckily, she was quick-witted and realized that the person in the room was me and not you. She even helped me coax Mother away. Jolin tilted her little head and chuckled. Arbor nodded. What did she say? He said that he was here to see Big Sister and to thank you. The way he spoke was so strange that I couldn't understand him. Chow Lin puffed up her cheeks. She said she's getting married at the end of the month, before my sister. Oh, she embroidered a handkerchief for Big Sister. She said it's a humble item, but her heart is sincere. She hopes big sister will like it. Jolin took out a small box and stuffed it into Arbor's hands. He blinked and said, I just opened it. It's beautifully embroidered. Arbor nodded and put away the box with the silk handkerchief. Sister, are you very familiar with Miss Lee? Yes, she's not bad. She finally got rid of that lazy dog, the son of the great king, and married into a good family. All right, you can go back to the court to rest. Arbor raised her hand and rubbed her younger sister's head. After sending Shaoliner away, Arbor washed up and went to rest. In the next few days, when she had nothing to do, she would stay in the room to draw talismans and refine pills. Most of the time, she would be embroidering flowers. Yes, embroidering lotus flowers. That's right. She only knew how to embroider one type of flower. At first, Mother praised her for her talent, but 3 days later, seeing that she only knew how to embroider one lotus flower, Mother didn't say anything else. She leisurely welcomed her wedding ceremony. Chapter 1242. Early in the morning, after she finished bathing and changed her clothes, she quietly sat in the east room and waited. The entire coming-of-age ceremony proceeded methodically under the auspices of her father and mother. Qiao Zhongbang and his wife had already welcomed the guests of honor into the venue. When the music started, they saw their daughter dressed in formal attire walking over from afar. The husband and wife looked at each other, their eyes filled with emotion, but even more so with emotion that their daughter had already matured. The guests of honor who came to attend the coming-of-age ceremony were the family members of the entire Mo Kingdom capital's influential officials. Qiao Zhongbang cupped his fists and said some pleasantries before announcing the official start of his daughter Arbor's coming-of-age ceremony. After a round of greetings, 8th Princess Mou, who had volunteered to be Miss Qiao's assistant, was the first to walk out. She solemnly bowed to all the spectators. The 8th princess turned around, her eyes blinking at Arbor before she picked up a comb and combed her hair. Arbor surprisingly didn't have the slightest bit of impatience after performing a set of tedious etiquette. It wasn't until Madame Ren picked up the hairpin that Emolienne had personally made that a slightly panicked announcement came from outside. Her Majesty the Queen has arrived. Her Majesty the Queen has arrived. Everyone was slightly startled, but since they were all madams and young misses who had seen the world, they stood up calmly and faced the entrance to bow in unison, loudly paying their respects to the Queen. Empress Zhao walked in from the front door while being escorted by people. She was wearing a wide-sleeved brocade gown and a multicolored phoenix coronet, looking awe-inspiring. You may all rise, Empress Zhao said indifferently before walking up to Arbor. She carefully sized her up from head to toe before nodding slightly. She extended her right hand. An elderly nurse Huaxian immediately stepped forward and opened the lid of a long jade box. She bowed and took out a purple jade hairpin, respectfully handing it to Empress Zhao. This is the heavenly phoenix purple jade hairpin that Her Majesty the Empress Dowager used for her coming-of-age ceremony back then. Queen Zhao's fingers lightly brushed that hairpin as she smiled at Xiao Mu. And it was even personally crafted by the late king. When everyone heard this, they could not help but let out a series of gasps. This heavenly phoenix purple jade hairpin, heavens, they had heard of it before. It wasn't as simple as an accessory. It was something that could save one's life at a critical moment. It was said that it could withstand all attacks below the divine realm 3 times. And it was this heavenly phoenix purple jade hairpin that had indeed saved the Empress Dowager's life. Such a divine item that could save her life twice. The Empress Dowager actually bestowed it to the crown princess without blinking an eye. Just how much did he value this little crown princess? Qiao Zhongbang and his wife were slightly terrified. This item is too precious. Your Majesty, my daughter. Empress Zhao raised her hand to stop the couple from speaking. She took the heavenly phoenix purple jade hairpin and slowly lifted her sleeve to fix the little fellow's crown. Thank you, grandmother. Thank you, mother. Arbor raised her head, her eyes brightening as she looked into the distance. Prince Mo was standing there with narrowed eyes, secretly peeking at his little wife. His Jojo had come of age. Crown Prince Mo only felt that his heart was pounding nonstop. At this time, his eyes had long blocked out all the people present. Only that slender figure entered his eyes and entered his heart. "Haha, I'm not late, right?" A laugh came from afar. Everyone looked strangely at that person. The Mu family's seventh master, Mu Jingrui, had actually come uninvited. When Qiao Zhongbong and Wei Ziqin saw this person, their expressions changed slightly. Wei Ziqin even grabbed Arbor's small hand tightly. Chapter 1243. Although Mu Jingrui's appearance appeared very strange, he did not interrupt the hairpin ceremony's proceedings. Instead, he chose a seat and sat down, looking at Arbor with a smile. Mu Jingrui's aura was powerful, and even the white-haired elderly man following behind him appeared to have an extremely high cultivation. The muscles on the elderly man's arms bulged as he stared at Arbor like an eagle. The duo's appearance instantly caused many people present to lower their heads and restrain their auras. This was the frightening aspect of an expert's aura. Mu Jingrui of the Divine Province represented the Divine Province's Talisman Patrician family. Compared to the Talisman Patrician family in the Mo Kingdom on Sikong planet, the difference was like heaven and earth. Mu Jingrui's appearance only caused the atmosphere to turn solemn for a moment. Soon, the hairpin ceremony resumed, and everything proceeded smoothly until the ceremony was complete. Arbor and Prince Mo met each other's gazes from afar for a long time before they quickly left under their mother's gaze. When Arbor's astonished gaze flitted past Mu Jingrui, she was slightly puzzled, but she did not say anything and merely nodded at him aloofly. After she returned to her room, Xiaoyao walked up and said with a grin, "Miss, are you tired? Take off your clothes and rest for a bit." "I'm not tired." Arbor shook her head aloofly and sat down by the window. She reflexively caressed the lustrous jade bracelet on her wrist that was hidden deep inside her sleeve. "Morong soon. I'm coming of age today. And you, where are you?" Arbor's eyes dimmed, and she lowered her head, allowing Xiaoyao to swiftly remove the ornaments on her head and braid her hair into a simple braid. "Madam." Two calls came from outside the door. Wei Ziqin walked in and glanced at her with a bit of panic and unease. Jojo. "What is it, Mom?" Arbor put down the fine-toothed comb in her hand and looked at Wei Ziqin in confusion. "Come with me." Wei Ziqin took her little hand and held it with a lot of strength. Seeing his mother's strange expression, Arbor stood up and comforted her. "Mother, what's the matter? Don't ask. Come with me to your father's study. You'll know when you get there." Arbor was baffled. Seeing that his mother was hemming and hawing, he didn't ask any further. He changed into a set of plain clothes and followed her out to his father's study. As soon as she entered, she saw the Mu family's seventh master sitting on a round-back chair in his father's study. When he saw her enter, he smiled at her. Although Qiao Mu had a faint favorable impression of this seventh master Mu, who she had sparred with before, but now, he had openly brought people to visit his father and sat in his father's study. On the other hand, his father was standing timidly to the side. Suddenly, Qiao Mu felt a bit of disgust towards him. What was this? The upper three provinces' special sense of superiority over the lower star domain? Just like the middle six prefectures, they could do whatever they wanted in the lower star field, and they could do whatever they wanted. That was why they could attack the Holy Water sect without hesitation, because they coveted the holy water. Because they had that kind of strength back then. Arbor's gaze chilled, and Mu Jingrui caught the subtle change in her expression in that instant. He couldn't help but be taken aback. The little girl suddenly didn't like him. Why? Chapter 1244. At this time, Emolien, who hadn't gone far from the Marquis of Jeyun's estate, looked at this uninvited guest who suddenly jumped onto the carriage with impatience in her eyes. "Your Highness, it's him?" Huifeng pursed his lips tightly as he glowered at the fat elder, who abruptly jumped onto her Highness's carriage without any rules or etiquette. Emolien raised her hand to stop him from continuing and said indifferently, "It's fine. You may withdraw first. Your Highness, do you really want to continue staying here? Second elder came to find me earlier, and I've already made things clear to him. I need at least another year before I can leave." Is there such a thing to be concerned about in the secular world of the lower star domain? The fat elder sighed and said, His Majesty is about to completely lose his patience. The fat elder glanced at him. Moreover, the sacred fire in your body is about to awaken. Even the ancient Emolien's seal can't suppress the sacred fire's awakening. When the time comes, the seal will break and the sacred fire awakens, and the two will merge, directly restoring your cultivation to the God realm. The lower star domain simply can't tolerate you. Heavenly law also won't let you off. Right now, the reason you can move freely under heavenly law's nose is entirely because of the suppression of Emolien's seal on your body. The fat elder sighed and said, You're the one who inherited the most ancient lotus seal in the entire Mo clan. What are you still attached to in this secular world branch family of the lower star domain? Back then, if it weren't for the internal strife in the divine province and the political situation being shaken, His Majesty the Emperor would have. All right, that's enough. Emolien coldly interrupted Third Elder's words. I already made it very clear to Second Elder last time. I still need another year. During this year I won't leave or go anywhere. The fat elder heaved a long sigh of relief. Oh, Your Highness, but the seal on your body will inevitably break on its own within 3 months. How long will you be willful for? Aren't you also well aware? When you comprehend the third layer of the Death Lotus seal, the breaking of the seal will be unstoppable. Even if you secretly suppress it with all your might, it's still useless. Emolien coldly turned her head to look at the fat elder in front of her. Third uncle, I can't go back. At least not now. You brat, you said you? The fat elder sighed with melancholy. He looked at him and shook his head. You're just as stubborn as your mother. The fat elder sighed again. He took out a small black pagoda the size of a palm from his pocket and threw it to the elder. Carry it with you. It can hide the God realm aura that is about to be released from your body. The fat elder straightened his body and squatted in front of Emolien, advising earnestly, I'm telling you, child, if heavenly law were to discover you, it would be a very troublesome matter. Uncle. That's right. The fat elder waved his hand and looked at the picturesque young child in front of him. He couldn't help but sigh worriedly. Look at you, child. As of experienced, you've trained your heart to be wild. If you marry a wife in the lower star domain, will your father admit it? Who needs him to admit it? Emolien sneered. He doesn't need to intervene in my affairs, and I don't need his approval to marry a wife. Third elder was speechless when he heard this. He pointed a trembling finger at Emolien and shook it. Father and son are both the same. Chapter 12:45. Emolien's thin lips were pursed into a straight line, her expression incomparably cold and hard. The fat elder shook his head and said, Although that little girl's talent is indeed not bad, this is far from enough. Your Highness's status is extremely honorable. Even the daughters of the first wives of the 6 major families of the divine prefecture with outstanding constitution and aptitude are not worthy of you. What's more, a little girl from the lower star region. Your Highness is playing with fire. Even if you marry her in the lower star region now, the Emperor of the divine prefecture will not recognize this marriage. Who knows, he might even vent his anger on the little girl. Emolien's cold gaze suddenly fell on the fat elder. If that person dares to lay a hand on my Jojo, I will make Jojo lose a single strand of hair. I will overturn the entire divine prefecture. Humph! What's a small and lousy divine prefecture? If I Jojo like her, I will naturally offer her with both hands. The fat elder was stunned for a moment, then shook his finger at Emolien and sighed. You're exactly the same as your father back then. No one would believe that you're not father and son. All right, I won't say more to you. Anyway, you know what you're doing. Once you're done, hurry back to the divine prefecture. If the heavenly Tao opposes you, it's not a laughing matter. Previously, you stayed in the lower star region because your body was suppressed by the seal, and the divine realm aura was not broken. Now, things are different, child. Third uncle, I understand. All right, don't blame me for being long-winded. I've already met your adoptive father and mentioned this to him. The fat elder was a little angry at the mention of this. You didn't see his constipated expression at that time. It was as if I was going to snatch his son away. He even took 3 steps back, as if he was about to stop breathing. Was it that exaggerated? This monarch of the branch family of the Lower Star region was too infuriating. He was entrusted to look after young Master Gu, and after 20 years, he actually wanted to seize the emperor's son. What a strange person. Emolien glanced at the fat elder with a slightly serious expression. You've gone to grandmother and mother. No. The fat elder glanced at him. I only looked for your adoptive father. Sai, I'll leave this matter to you. We'll have to leave sooner or later. Your Highness, since you were 3 years old, the Institute of Elders of the Divine Land has come to visit you through a special passage every year. You should have known that you would have to leave the Lower Star region sooner or later. Emolien pursed her lips and remained silent. It hasn't been easy for the great emperor. Ever since your mother fell into a deep sleep, His Majesty has been under a lot of pressure. Didn't Wushuang say that he was about to marry a new wife? Isn't that woman about to move into Morning Sunlight Palace? Don't listen to that brat Wushuang's nonsense. The fat elder blew his beard and glared. His Majesty's feelings for your mother have not changed in the past 20 years. Humph. Sigh. Child, you have to believe me. The fat elder hurriedly said, You will know when you return. The fat elder raised his hand and patted Emolien's hand. The little girl's matter. I don't need him to care. Emolien said angrily. He can't even control his own wife and he dares to control me? The fat elder felt that if the emperor was here, he would probably raise his hand and strangle his son to death. Okay. The fat elder couldn't control him, so he simply waved his hand and said, I will stay here for a while. If you need anything, you can find me in the courtyard. Chapter 1246. At the same time, in Chao Zhongbang's study at the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate, Arbor's cold gaze flitted over 7th Master Mu and the white-haired elder. With a flick of his sleeves, he sat down in front of them. The white-haired elder behind 7th Master Mu knitted his brows and couldn't help but say angrily, How dare you be so impudent and rude in front of 7th Master Mu? Arbor's cold gaze swept over the elder without any warmth. My time is limited. I'll give you 7 minutes. You. The white-haired elder was enraged. Just as he was about to flare up, 7th Master Mu reached out to stop him. Jojo. Mu Jingrui looked at her calmly and said, I believe that with your intelligence, you should know the purpose of our visit today. I don't know. Arbor's voice was strangely indifferent, mixed with a few traces of indifference. The white-haired elder was instantly enraged. How can you not know? He turned to glare at Chao Zhongbang and Wei Ziqin. Didn't we agree that day? On the day of the ceremony, we will tell her the truth. Wei Ziqin covered her face and choked out, I don't know how to say it. Arbor's heart had long sunk to the bottom of the valley along with his mother's soft sobs. She didn't even dare to delve into the cause of this panic. She stood up and coldly ordered them to leave. Since you're hemming and hawing and don't want to say it, then there's no need to. Chunying, see the guests out. Mu Jingrui stood up and sighed at her cold back. Jojo, you've already guessed it, haven't you? Jojo, you have such great talisman talent. But have you never doubted your origins? The talisman lineage is passed down from generation to generation. It's very rare for someone not from my Mu family to have such outstanding talisman drawing talent. Arbor's back was facing Mu Jingrui and the white-haired elder. Her back was already completely stiff. Your surname is Mu, and you're called Mu Chao. You're a child of the Mu family of the Divine Province, Mu Chao. My surname is Chao. As long as my surname is Chao, my surname will always be Chao, Arbor said coldly before turning around to leave. The white-haired old man couldn't hold back his anger. He jumped up and said angrily, You don't know what's good for you. If you weren't a member of the Mu family, do you think you would have such a good talent in drawing talismans? You're able to break through to become a high-level talisman master at such a young age? That's because you inherited your biological father's talisman talent, Arbor abruptly turned around. This was the first time Mu Jingrui had seen such a resolute and austere expression on the little girl's face. My talent has never been related to your Mu clan. She knew very well that her talent in talismans came from the Golden Talisman Jade Tome. As for the Golden Talisman Jade Tome, although she didn't remember how it was stored in her sea of consciousness, she was absolutely certain that this matter had absolutely nothing to do with the Divine Prefecture's Mu clan. Mu Jingrui looked at her with a complicated expression. Jojo, we can understand that you can't accept it right now. But that is indeed the case. You are the long-lost child of the Divine Prefecture's Mu clan. He took out a jade pendant with a red string hanging from his waist. This is half a jade pendant. Your foster mother also keeps the other half. Together, it's enough to prove your identity. Arbor was expressionless. Her eyes, which were like a dry well without any ripples, stared coldly at Mu Jingrui. In that instant, he only felt his heart tremble and his entire body turn cold. This child was seriously too cold. Her gaze didn't seem like she was looking at a relative at all. It was clearly like she was looking at an enemy who spoke without thinking. Chapter 1247. Then let me ask you, where is my birth mother? Arbor asked coldly. Wei Zichin's grip on Qiao Zhongbang's hand paused. Mu Jingrui was also taken aback and instantly shut up. After a while, he said, Jojo, I can't tell you about your mother for the time being. There are some misunderstandings here that cannot be clearly explained in a few words. Mu Jingrui sighed. I was entrusted by your grandfather to come find you. Jojo, you have to know that your grandfather has never given up on searching for you all these years. Ha ha! Arbor expressionlessly let out 2 chilling laughs. Then let me ask you again, what if I go with you? What identity will I use to go back? Jojo, our Mu family has set up a spatial talisman matrix in a place in the Mo Kingdom capital that connects the lower star domain and the Divine Province's Mu family. Only our Mu family can activate it. It can be transported once every 6 months, and no more than 5 people can be transported at a time. When the time comes, we can use this spatial talisman matrix to transport back. Arbor gazed icily at the man in front of him. That bone-chilling gaze made Mu Jingrui seem to see his sister-in-law through her in an instant. That cold, arrogant, and aloof woman whom he had respected for many years. But it was very clear that the little girl in front of him was even more heartless than his aloof and arrogant sister-in-law. She seemed to really not like the Mu family. Ridiculous. You want me to follow you back to your family with my tail between my legs like a stray dog? Arbor's expression did not change in the slightest when he read these words without any warmth. Why should I listen to you? Child, don't be unable to tell good from bad. The white-haired elder roared angrily. Arbor waved his hand, and a green vine burrowed out from his sleeve, lashing out at the elder's face without warning. So what if I'm unable to tell good from bad? Smack! Mu Jingrui's figure flashed and appeared in front of the elderly man. He reached out and firmly grabbed the vine whip, feeling a slight pain in his palm from the whip. Mu Jingrui's eyes widened. When he turned his head, he saw Arbor send out a wave of mystic energy towards the white-haired elder. Jojo. Mu Jingrui was shocked. The intensity of this profound energy was actually boom. The old man was hit head-on by the profound energy. Although he tried to defend himself, he was still knocked out of the study by Arbor's profound energy. He directly rolled down the stairs and fell rather tragically. You'd better not challenge my patience. Arbor's face was cold. You're already so old. Don't make yourself look bad. A level 14 mystic cultivator. While Mu Jingrui was shocked, great joy also surfaced in his eyes. This child actually leaped to become a level 14 mystic cultivator at such a young age. Her talisman talent was also not inferior to Stardust. It could be said that such a young genius with such achievements was clearly superior to the current eldest miss of their Divine Province's Mu family. What Divine Province's Mu family? It has nothing to do with me, Arbor said with an icy expression. He raised his hand and said, Chunnying. See the guests out. Yes, Mississippi. Chunning hastily flashed in from outside and respectfully bowed to 7th Master Mu and Mu Jingrui. This way, please. The old man stood up with a face full of dirt and grime, his expression displeased. Simply preposterous. Chapter 1248. As a member of the Mu family, this little girl's talent was indeed pretty good. But her natural disposition was too arrogant and proud. Compared to their family's considerate, gentle, and generous eldest miss, she was simply too lacking. Jojo. Mu Jingrui was speechless. He simply didn't expect that Arbor would actually refuse to acknowledge them. Arbor turned around and swept his gaze over the two without the slightest warmth. Ask yourself honestly, if I wasn't a level 14 mystic cultivator, if I wasn't a high-level talisman practitioner, if I wasn't such a gifted little genius, would you still take me back? As he spoke, he sneered mockingly. Family also needs to pay attention to fate. Now, it seems that I'm not fated to be with the Mu family. Please, I won't see you out. You. The white-haired elder was furious. Do you know what kind of existence the divine province's Mu family represents? If you don't have the family's protection, you won't be able to go far in the future. Could it be that your sights are only limited to a tiny lower star domain, a mere Mo Kingdom's crown princess? The white-haired elder furiously said. Do you know that if you return to the family, with your talent and status, you can even take back your original engagement? You don't need to compromise and marry the crown prince of a tiny lower star domain. Old bye. Mu Jingrui coldly shouted. We'll discuss the engagement later. Right now, we're talking about bringing Xiao Qiao home. What bullshit engagement, I won't acknowledge it. If you dare to insult my Lien again, I'll turn you completely into a dead man. The little fellow's sudden outburst of coldness sent chills down people's spines. A frog at the bottom of a well. The white-haired elder was so angry that he panted heavily. Your original partner could have been the young master of Ming province in the upper 3 provinces. Scram! Arbor threw a handful of poisonous sand over, directly blocking the elder's chattering mouth. Qiao Zhongbong and Wei Ziqin dazedly looked at their daughter. Chunying, what are you spacing out for? See the guests out. After saying this, he didn't spare Mu Jingrui and the white-haired old man another glance before leaving the study with a flick of his sleeves, leaving behind the white-haired old man with a rather unsightly expression. Mu Jingrui looked thoughtfully at Arbor's departing figure and didn't say anything for a long time. Wei Ziqin and Qiao Zhongbong looked at each other. After a long time, Wei Ziqin seemed to have been poked by something. She pulled her hand away and said hurriedly, I'm going to see my daughter. Wei Ziqin rushed to the door of the room in Arbor. She stopped and stood there in a daze for a long time. That was until Qiao Mu opened the door and met her eyes at the doorway. Wei Ziqin followed her in quietly and sat on the edge of the bed in Arbor. She looked at her and said softly, Jojo, you should calm down now. I've been very calm this whole time. Arbor said mildly. Do you blame Mom for keeping you in the dark? Wei Ziqin anxiously reached out to grab her little hand. Arbor's mind was actually in a mess. She was completely unprepared for today's incident. That Mu family's 7th master came to tell her that she wasn't a member of the Qiao family and that her surname was Mu. This was truly laughable. Jojo, I'm sorry. Mom, what do you have to be sorry about? Arbor turned to look at Wei Ziqin and said seriously, if not for Mom and Dad taking care of me all these years, I might have been long gone. Chapter 1249. No, you're not allowed to spout nonsense. Wei Ziqin's tears immediately flowed down, and she reached out to touch her daughter's face with trembling hands. Jojo, are you still willing to call me Mom? If you're my mom for a day, you'll be my mom forever. She had been on tenterhooks for a long time, but the haze was instantly lifted, and she saw the light. Jojo didn't blame her at all. Wei Ziqin covered her mouth with one hand and sobbed for a while. Arbor wrapped her arm around her shoulder and patted it lightly. Mom, just ignore the words of an idle person. Wei Ziqin shook her head. That person is your 7th uncle. As she spoke, she took out half of a jade pendant tied with a red string from her pocket. This is what your biological mother left for you. I'm giving it to you now. Arbor didn't take it, and her little hand even shrank back a little. Wei Ziqin was stunned, and she looked at her with tears rolling down her face. Jojo, you're not blaming her, are you? No. Arbor indifferently spat out these two words with an icy gaze. Although I only spent 2 to 3 months with your mother, I know that she loved you dearly. Wei Ziqin wiped her tears and said, she had just given birth to you, and her body was extremely weak. At that time, an enemy came looking for her. To protect you, she handed you over to me. Mom. Arbor interrupted her. Then tell me, who is my biological mother? Wei Ziqin suddenly stopped talking, and her expression also calmed down. She shook her head and said, I swore before Miss that I wouldn't tell her. Before Miss led the enemy away, she told me that your surname is Mu. But to be honest, Mom and your father have always lived in Kwoto village with you, so we didn't know much about the outside world. It wasn't until we went to the capital and heard about the talisman aristocratic family, the Mu family, that we vaguely had some guesses. Jojo, do you blame Mom for not telling you? Arbor shook his head indifferently. Mother, my mind is in a mess right now. I don't want to say anything. Wei Ziqin grabbed her little hand and said anxiously, Child, don't blame your biological mother. She didn't want me to tell you because she wanted you to live peacefully and not be blinded by the hatred of the secular world. She doesn't want you to embark on a path that only lives for hatred. Arbor nodded obediently, but his expression was somewhat cold. I understand, Mother. No, you don't. Wei Ziqin's heart was about to break when she saw her indifferent expression. You can hate anyone in the Mu family, but your mother is the only exception. Arbor did not speak for a long time. Wei Ziqin saw that she looked a little tired, so she got up and wiped her tears. Then you should rest well. Mother. Mother. Then do you know that perhaps because of my biological mother, I've long been targeted by someone? Wei Ziqin's footsteps paused, and she froze in place. What do you mean? Arbor began to understand a little now that those things that happened in her previous life were really not some special coincidence. Her identity was special, and there was simply someone who didn't want her to return to the Mu family in the Divine Province. So since the age of 7, she had already been targeted. In a dark corner that you can't see, there's a pair of eyes that has always been staring at me, Arbor said with a cold expression. Before this, I couldn't figure it out. When did I ever offend someone from Shuntian Prefecture when I was 7? Until today, I finally understand. Chapter 1250. The identity of the Mu family's daughter has brought me disaster from the moment I was born. Arbor's eyes are extremely cold as she looks ahead, a sneer on the corner of her mouth. You didn't tell me anything, and let me live my whole life in ignorance. My hatred, from the moment I was born, I can't hide from it. Wei Ziqin stares at the child in front of her in a daze. When she talks about the Mu family, there's not the slightest bit of affection, but more of disgust. The disgust in her eyes is about to flow out. What a joke. A family that has never cared for her even a little bit. Why should she care about them? Even all the disasters in her past were caused by them. Mother, overprotection is actually a kind of harm. Arbor indifferently says, because a lot of times if we are not strong enough, then it's still the same as before. Even if we want to live the rest of our lives peacefully and smoothly, there might be someone who doesn't want us to live well. Jojo, did something happen that Mother doesn't know about? Arbor shakes her head and doesn't say anything else. After Wei Ziqin leaves with a trace of apprehension, Arbor has been sitting in front of the bronze mirror in a daze, looking at herself in the mirror. Her ears are constantly replaying the conversation with Wei Ziqin. Why is he so sure that I'm a member of the Mu family? You look 50% similar to your biological mother. Those who knew your mother would be able to recognize you at a glance. No matter who you are. Arbor looks at the faint image in the bronze mirror and coldly says, I will make you pay for this. It's enough to fool her for a lifetime, If anyone still wants to meddle in her life, no matter who it is, she will make them die. After sitting in a daze for a while, Arbor feels a slight headache, so she gets up and walks to the bedside. She hasn't been sleeping well. It seems that even when she's in a dream, it's very uncomfortable. However, when she opened her eyes and saw Emolien's enlarged smiling face, her mood inexplicably improved for some reason. Chow Chow, you're really lazy. You slept until late in the morning. He poked her little face with his finger and lifted her up from the bed. What happened? He reached out and rubbed her face. It's only been one night. You haven't seen me for so long that you're looking at me like that. Jojo himself did not know how adorable those eyes were. It was as if they were glued to his body and could not be pulled away. Arbor reached out and hooked his neck. Emolien, I didn't sleep well last night. She must have missed me. That guy shamelessly said this and carried her in front of the bronze mirror. Seeing that she was reaching for the heavenly phoenix violet jade hairpin, he hurriedly pushed her small hand away. He had spent so much time making a phoenix hairpin for Jojo's coming-of-age ceremony, but his grandfather had snatched it away from him that just thinking about it made him unhappy. Emolien threw the hairpin into the brocade box. I'm not wearing this. Why not? Grandmother gave it to me. Emolien glanced at him angrily. You're not wearing it even if grandmother gave it to you. Wear the one I gave you. Jojo, why didn't you sleep well last night? Seeing Xiao Yao walk in, Arbor reaches out to pat Emolien. Prince Mo reluctantly put down the comb in his hand and handed it to Xiao Yao. Didn't you say that you missed you? Prince Mo's eyes lit up when he heard this. You really missed me. I'll tell you that I'm done for the day. If you don't, it means that I haven't finished yet. Chapter 12:51. Arbor expressionlessly said, I was lying to you. Xiao Yao giggled. Crown Prince. Dado no, his darling was getting better at tricking people. Look at how formidable this little trick was, making his heart soar one moment and then drop to the bottom of the valley the next. His entire person and mood rose and fell with her, floating up and down. His heart really hurt. Emolien swayed and leaned to her side, saying, Darling, let's not go to the lake today. How about we go hiking instead? I want to go out for tea with Miss Lee today. Who's Miss Lee? Was it more important than accompanying your husband? Emolien's handsome face was sour as he gazed unhappily at his little wife. Then I'll go with you. When Arbor heard this, she was immediately displeased. We're having a gathering with close friends. What are you going to do? You're sitting there like a national treasure, and the girls can even whisper to each other. Being disdained by his wife like this, the crown prince was also displeased. He reached out to carry Arbor, who had finished combing her hair, and rubbed against her soft little body. Go together or climb the mountain with your husband. Choose one. Anyway, they were all people of the pugilistic world, so they didn't pay attention to things like male and female etiquette. Originally, their Seekong planet was more lenient towards mystic cultivators. Prince Mo made up his mind to follow his wife the whole way, leaving Arbor unsure whether to laugh or cry. This person was very vexing. I even invited senior sister Liang and the 8th princess. Why are you joining in the fun? This was a gathering for us girls. Prince Mo pursed his lips. If you don't bring me, I'll tell Mom. Xiao Yao burst out laughing and quickly went out to prepare breakfast for the two darlings. Arbor rolled her eyes at her. They don't bring husbands. Then have them bring all of them. What's there to talk about in a tea house? Why don't we go hiking in Fu Mountain and roast game together? Arbor thought that hiking in such fine weather wasn't a bad idea, so she reluctantly nodded. You're so annoying. Then go and contact them. She wasn't happy that she had to inform everyone. Prince Mo nodded happily and poked her little head with his finger. Okay. We'll leave in an hour. After saying that, he went out in high spirits and instructed people to take care of it. Arbor's gloomy mood from yesterday was swept away as he watched the crown prince roll out with lanterns and colored banners. He looked out of the window and muttered to himself, different situations call for different measures. There's no need to ruin your mood for some idle people. She glanced at the fair and tender little face in the bronze mirror, and her mood relaxed a little. She got up and walked out. At this time in her previous life, she was still frowning miserably day and night because she had yet to open her meridians. Compared to this, the current her was simply too blessed. In that case, what was there to complain about? Life went on and she had to look forward. What was there to be afraid of? At most, she would just deal with whatever came her way. Jojo. As soon as she walked out of the courtyard, she saw Qiao Zhongbong and Wei Ziqin welcoming her. Father, mother. The little fellow greeted them in a crisp voice. Seeing that she was in a rather good mood, Wei Ziqin's heart relaxed a little. She hurried forward to hold her daughter's hand and said, Little Mo told Mom that he's going to take you out to play later. This is good too. Go out and relax, don't think too much. No matter what, your dad and Mom's Jojo, our precious daughter. Arbor nodded her little head. Chapter 1252. After His Highness the Crown Prince organized it, the original gathering of 4 sisters inexplicably turned into a 10-person outing in Fu Mountain. Besides inviting Miss Li's fiancé, Pei Yidao, the young master of the Count of Jian, Anne's estate, he even thoughtfully invited Miss Li's sister-in-law, Pei Jia. It was best for sisters-in-law and sisters-in-law to get closer. It would be best if they didn't have time to steal his wife. His Highness also very considerately found companions for his 8th sister and senior sister Liang, who were single. They were the State Duke of Qing's estate's 2nd young master, Shi Guangyun, and the Royal Guard's commander, Hui Feng's 2nd brother, Hui Fan. The 4-person outing of the best friends became a 9-person outing. When the Crown Prince was about to set off, he ran into his 12th brother, who insisted on dragging the Song family's Song Xiaotai along. On Arbor's side, the little monk bawled and hugged her thigh the entire way. She had no choice but to drag the monk out with her. Our dear Qiao San hadn't returned from the academy yet, so Xiao Liner and Xiao Yao went to visit their cousin, Pu Rulin. As a result, the group of 12 people encountered Duan Yu, Situ Yi, and Lu Yexin, who happened to meet on the way to Fu Mountain. What started out as 4 people drinking tea turned into a 15-person outing and barbecuing. The group sat together in an extremely spacious and luxurious carriage, drinking tea and chatting wittily along the way. Qiao Mu was speechless as she fiddled with the little monk in her hands. She pinched his small ears and rubbed his small face before teasing him. We're going to eat barbecued meat. It's not like you can eat it. This little monk can eat vegetables and mushrooms. Who's going to roast mushrooms for you? Arbor rolled her eyes. Liang Qingqing couldn't resist picking up the little monk. Little junior sister, where did you pick up such an adorable little monk? He's too adorable. Benefactress. The little monk wriggled his little arms and legs, trying his best to crawl back into Arbor's embrace. Liang Qingqing rubbed his cheeks, grinning from ear to ear. This little fellow is too interesting. How old are you, little monk? This little monk is 4.5 years old. Ha 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 ha. Look at that serious little face of yours. So fun. Liang Qingqing seemed to have found her favorite toy. She hugged the little monk and couldn't bear to part with him. The little monk, however, was very disgusted and kept throwing her hand away. He struggled with his little hands and legs, wanting to throw himself into Arbor's arms. Emolien was very happy when he saw this, and he cast an extremely friendly gaze at senior sister Liang. Then, he drew close to his wifey and said with a smile, Qiao Qiao, when we arrive later, sister-in-law. Mo sure, interrupted their conversation. Hence, Qiao Mu looked up in his direction. When they first met, this silly prince kept trying to get close to her and was almost thrown out of the carriage by his elder brother. Big brother, why don't you let me talk to sister-in-law? Mo, you said angrily. What else do you have to say? Mo Lien glanced at her brother with a hint of disdain. That's all you've got. You're just thinking about Tao. What peach? Arbor blinked. Eldest sister-in-law. The mention of this poked at Mo's sore spot. He immediately pulled a long face and said, Big brother is so mean. He's so petty that he won't even let me look at the Tao that you gave him. He wasn't like this in the past. Emolien pursed his lips and said to Arbor in a low voice, "Give him 2 peaches and stuff his mouth. He's been nagging about this peach for about 7 to 8 years." Chapter 12:53. Eldest brother, you're still mocking me. Mo huffed. Emolien helplessly glanced at him and shook her head. The youth was wearing a dark-colored, narrow-sleeved, short-collared robe today. His black hair was casually bundled up, making him appear to be in high spirits. His looks and talents were good, and he was also intelligent and sensible. It was just that he was still a little uncertain. It was no wonder that when she told Royal Father last night that she wanted to entrust the country to you, Royal Father revealed an "the sky is falling" expression. She wished for nothing more than to hug his thigh and wail bitterly. In reality, although was still young, some of his views and insights were quite profound. He was a good child. If he was slowly nurtured with time, he would definitely be a wise ruler of the country. 1 year's time was a little rushed, but it wasn't impossible to nurture this child. But now, it seemed that even 1 year's time was almost gone. Here. Arbor raised her hand and took out a plate of juicy peaches from her inner world, beckoning everyone to come up and take them. She had thrown some of these peaches into her inner world, but after some consumption, there weren't many left. Thinking of Paradise Planet that was still in a sealed state, Arbor felt somewhat melancholy. She also didn't know when her little Chocho would wake up. She kind of missed those noisy little fellows. Eldest sister-in-law, it's so delicious. Song Shoutai turned around and nearly swallowed his own tongue when he saw the 12th prince's appearance. You rascal, is there a need to reveal an expression that looks like you're about to cry because it's delicious? Arbor also couldn't help but twitch her mouth. Seeing his pitiful appearance, her heart couldn't help but soften. She took out a few more peaches from her inner world and gifted them to him. Keep them well and eat slowly. Eldest sister-in-law. You are really like's eldest sister-in-law. Emolien spread open her fingers and pushed away that fellow's face that was pouncing on her. Scram! Eldest brother, you're actually this kind of eldest brother. The entire carriage was laughing and giggling, and the atmosphere was extremely good. The carriage turned onto the mountain path of Mount Fu. Because the carriage was too large, they alighted and planned to walk up the mountain. It was just past 7 in the morning, and the weather was clear and sunny with a gentle morning breeze. Everyone gazed at the distant green mountains, feeling extremely good for a moment. The Mo capital's defensive fortifications could be considered the most perfect defensive fortifications on the entire Seekong planet. Currently, Southern Bailey, Northern Wei, and other countries were also building similar fortifications. If the corpse puppet situation could be controlled and slowly improved, everything would be perfect. Everyone walked up the mountain while talking and laughing. Not long after they left, several horses and carriages arrived at the foot of Fu Mountain. The vassal prince of Anan was dressed in crimson riding attire. He dismounted from his horse in high spirits and tossed the horsewhip in his hand to the manservant beside him. The girls walked down from the carriages one after another. They looked up at the hillside and whispered to each other. Your Highness, you have a good idea. How can this flower appreciation festival be as interesting as a spring outing? The one who spoke was a young man with a flattering smile. Everyone glanced at him in disdain, revealing mocking gazes. 5th young Master Zheng. Has your Zheng family been doing well recently? A fat young man smiled as he looked at the 5th young master of the Zheng family. As soon as he said this, a few people laughed. Tisk, young Master Su's words aren't right. As the saying goes, even a rotten ship has a 3-inch nail, not to mention the dignified Zheng estate. It's impossible for it to collapse so easily. 5th young Master Zheng's face flushed red. Chapter 12:54. Thus, everyone followed suit and mocked him, causing his face to turn as red as a monkey's butt. Fatty Wu Xiaoen, couldn't stand it anymore, and he couldn't resist cursing. You don't need to gossip about the Zheng estate. Let me tell you, 6th young master is my brother. No matter what, you shouldn't ridicule the Zheng estate's people out of consideration for 6th young master. When everyone heard this, they also recalled that Zheng family's young prodigy, sixth Zheng, and they couldn't help but shut their mouths in boredom. When the vassal prince of Nan saw this, he didn't say anything else. He turned to look at a young girl standing gracefully among the young ladies and said with a smile, "After you, commandery princess," and nodded and leisurely made her way up the mountain with small, light steps while maintaining her graceful and luxurious bearing. The vassal prince of Nan's eyes flickered, and he immediately walked up alongside her. He said with a smile, "If commandery princess feels tired, I can order people to carry you up in a small sedan." Commandery princess Anne replied softly, "Thank you for your concern, vassal prince. We are out for a walk. If we don't climb the mountain and rely on a sedan for everything, wouldn't it lose the meaning of a walk?" Commandery princess is right. The vassal prince of Nan chuckled and said with a nod, "Then let's go up. Supposedly, if we reach the summit before noon, we can see Fu Mountain's marvelous scenery under the red sun." "It is indeed so." Ian smiled faintly and said, "Fu Mountain's scenery has always been very good. If vassal prince is free, there is no harm in coming here for a walk." The two people led the way as they chatted and laughed. Behind them, 7 to 8 orioles and swallows jostled behind them, winking at each other in disdain. Look at her, she looks so smug. If the Queen Dowager hadn't adopted her, how could she have her current glamorous and dignified appearance? Wouldn't she still have to curl up in the declining Marquis of Su Anne's estate like a pitiful worm? A noble lady couldn't stand Commandery Princess Anne's pretentious appearance and couldn't resist commenting sourly, oh my, isn't this the miss of the Liu family? Why are you so envious? This sour stench is truly overwhelming, and I can't even block it." The third miss of the Marquis of Placation's estate, Su Mingzhu, mocked. Third sister, Su Mingxin, the younger concubine-born sister, saw that she was going to stir up trouble again. With just a few words, the young miss of the Liu family was glaring at her angrily. Su Mingxin couldn't help but reach out and pull on her sleeve. Su Mingzhu angrily flung her fourth sister's hand away. "Am I wrong? What a joke! That was Commandery Princess An, the Queen Dowager's favorite. How could she not hug her thigh tightly?" It was one thing for these idiots to offend Commandery Princess An, but they shouldn't let the Commandery Princess misunderstand that she, Su Mingzhu, was also picking on her and speaking ill of her behind her back. Miss Liu glared angrily at Su Mingzhu several times before turning her face away and ignoring her. The other young ladies were like stars surrounding the moon, hugging a veiled woman who raised her head and smiled fawningly. "Fengyan, didn't you say that second young master would come today? Second cousin brother has something urgent to deal with," Yang Fengyan said proudly. However, when he glanced at those girls from the corner of his eyes, he couldn't help but feel cold and mocking. These idiots, how could they have the right to have a crush on her second cousin? After walking for about an hour, the group of people walked for a long time. Suddenly, they heard Commandery Princess Yin exclaim, and everyone looked over. They saw a large group of young men and women sitting in a circle on the small slope at the top of the mountain. When they saw them walking over, they also turned to look at them. "Your Highness, what a coincidence." Chapter 12:55. Commandery Princess Ian smiled excitedly. Heavens, could this be fate? The two people did not have any agreement, yet they met without any warning. What was this if not fate? Evidently, this hilarious Commandery Princess had completely treated the crowd around the Crown Prince as background scenery. It's His Highness. His Highness the Crown Prince is also here. Miss Liu, Su Mingzhu, and the other young ladies all looked over with flushed faces, as if they had seen something excited. The vassal prince of Nan laughed heartily and was the first to greet with cupped fists. "Greetings to His Highness. Is His Highness bringing the Crown Princess on an outing? The 12th Prince is also here. Brother Guangyun." "Everyone, sorry for the disrespect." Mo Lien reflexively swept him a glance before nodding dryly at him. Sure, Guangyun and the rest stood up to greet and exchange pleasantries. During this time, darling Chow, senior sister Liang, Duan Yu, and the rest did not even lift their butts as they sat there calmly and continued to eat. There was already quite a bit of roasted game on the plate, and several large pieces of rabbit meat were currently flipping on the grill. The aroma wafted over as oil sizzled out. After walking for an entire morning, it was already close to noon. The vassal prince of Annan's entourage was rumbling with hunger, so their eyes involuntarily focused on the food on the grill. It was too sumptuous. Other than roasted pork, beef, mutton, and so on, the crown prince's entourage had also prepared all kinds of fruits and vegetables. They really knew how to enjoy themselves. However, after waiting for so long, no one from the crown prince's entourage invited them to sit down and eat together? Was this appropriate? Shouldn't they play together and share their food when they met by chance on the mountain? Arbor discovered that a flock of orioles and swallows were staring at her with very strange gazes. How could she know that they were waiting for her to invite them? Among the women, her status was the noblest. As long as she invited them, the others definitely would not have any objections. 8th Princess Mou was about to go crazy from holding back her laughter. According to her interactions with them, these people were probably going to die. Her little sister-in-law definitely did not think of inviting them at all, because they were not familiar with each other. The smile on Mou's face widened infinitely. Arbor's gaze swept across the group of women one by one. He raised his hand and gave the little monk a radish stick, stuffing it into his hand. He calmly took half a rabbit leg and said to Mou and the others, "Eat it while it's hot. Don't waste it. Benefactress, you can roast the mushrooms. It's delicious. Do you want some minced meat? I'll give you some minced meat roasted mushrooms. It smells good." Arbor winked at him. "No!" The little monk angrily shouted. "This little monk is a vegetarian." Liang Qingqing saw that he was extremely cute and couldn't help but reach out to touch his little bald head. "Little monk, why don't you renounce asceticism?" "Nonsense!" The small monk opened his small hands and forcefully pushed Liang Qingqing's palm away. Why would this little monk want to renounce asceticism? How can you marry a wife if you don't renounce asceticism? Liang Qingqing teased. Hurry up and renounce asceticism so that you can marry a wife when you grow up. When the little monk heard this, he looked up pensively. Before he could say, "Marry a benefactress," Emolien stuffed a radish stick into his mouth. You should continue being a monk." When the vassal prince of Annan and the others saw that they were completely ignoring them, they couldn't help but feel somewhat embarrassed. The commandery princess's eyes flickered. Just as she was about to step forward, a masked, gray-clothed man suddenly appeared in front of her and hacked at her with a saber. "Be careful, commandery princess." Chapter 1256. However, the vassal prince of Annan, Cho Fu, strode forward and fiercely embraced commandery princess and slender waist with his ape arms. He hugged her tightly and pulled her into his arms. This action was truly done in one go, and it was very manly. However, the two were not husband and wife after all, and they had never been engaged. This kind of overly intimate action appeared extremely strange in everyone's eyes. Many of the noble ladies covered their mouths with their hands in shock, and was also a bit alarmed and furious. She originally wanted to struggle, but the vassal prince of Annan's iron arms encircled her waist firmly, so she could not break free for a while. Amidst everyone's cries of shock, vassal prince Cho Fu swiftly struck the gray-clothed person's chest with his palm. The gray-clothed person did not even grunt, merely retreating a step after the vassal prince of Annan's palm strike. In the span of a breath, the person charged forward fearlessly, looking as if he was going to kill commandery princess N with a single strike. Anne's cultivation was not high to begin with, so she had yet to recover her wits from this sudden assassination. She reflexively shrunk into the vassal prince of Annan's embrace, her fair and petite hands clutching the lapels of his robes tightly. The gray-clothed person and his three subordinates had cornered the vassal prince of Annan inside their encirclement and attacked the vassal prince simultaneously. However, The vassal prince of divine courage hugged Commandery Princess Yen's waist with one hand as he moved back and forth inside the encirclement to fend off those people's attacks, occasionally swinging his sword in retaliation. Meanwhile, Arbor's group was standing far away from them. When the gray-clothed assassin swiftly appeared on the scene with several people, Arbor's group's first reaction was quite laughable. That was, they scrambled to put away the grill, plates, and meat, moving them back to prevent the dust from the fight from contaminating the food. That was why everyone was expressionless when they saw the vassal prince saving the damsel in distress. After moving the food and utensils to a safe distance, everyone sat down on the lawn and continued to drink tea and eat meat calmly. After the vassal prince of Anan stabbed that gray-clothed person with his backhand, the gray-clothed person quickly waved his hand and left swiftly with the assassins. Everything happened so quickly that it didn't even take 5 minutes to finish a cup of tea. Duan Yu shook his head speechlessly. Your acting is too fake. With this bunch of people's intelligence and their fake acting, they simply couldn't fool Duan Yu, Situi, and the others. Prince Emo smiled and said, It's fine. Just treat it as an after-dinner entertainment. What entertainment? I don't understand. Liang Qingqing didn't have many tricks up her sleeve. She didn't know what these people were talking about. He only knew that the people in the imperial court were very calculative. Arbor creased his brows. After glancing at En and the vassal prince of Anan, he retracted his gaze and told Liang Qingqing, Ignore them, a bunch of clowns. In order to win the beauty's favor, the vassal prince of Anan actually arranged such a baffling scene of a hero saving the beauty. It was really hard for people to have a good impression of him. On the other end, after the vassal prince of Anan soothed the frightened Commandery Princess Yen gently, the farce finally came to an abrupt end. The vassal prince of Anan volunteered to escort Commandery Princess Yen back to the palace. However, Commandery Princess Yen's gaze kept drifting toward Arbor's side, gazing at the crown prince in a daze through the crowd. Chapter 1257. However, it was a pity that no one in Arbor's group was paying attention to her. After they finished eating, they felt that they had rested enough, so they packed up their equipment and continued swimming deeper into Fu Mountain. When Yen saw that no one was asking her if she was injured or frightened, she couldn't help but feel aggrieved. Soon, the vassal prince of Anan used the excuse that the Commandery Princess had been frightened to cancel the activity and order everyone to return home. Meanwhile, he sent Commandery Princess Yen back to the palace as a matter of course. After the farce with the vassal prince of Anan ended, Arbor's group continued to stroll around merrily until the afternoon before dispersing. Arbor, who had not slept well the entire night, was a bit tired at this time. After getting on the carriage, she found the crown prince to use as a pillow. She had only wanted to close her eyes and take a nap, but she didn't expect that she would fall asleep soon after leaning against the crown prince. Emolienne stroked the back of her head before taking out a thin brocade blanket to cover her stomach. The little monk was sprawled on the ground on his back. He had long fallen asleep from exhaustion after playing for the entire day. Emolienne simply had the carriage driver stop the carriage by the roadside so that his Jojo could catch up on some sleep. Arbor slept for a full 2 hours before waking up. When she saw that her carriage was still at the foot of Fu Mountain, she couldn't help but be speechless. You didn't leave. The carriage's swaying disturbed your sleep. Emolienne brushed away the strands of hair that had drifted across her face. I'll send you back now. Arbor nodded and yawned. When she turned around and saw the little monk sleeping soundly with his limbs spread out, she couldn't help but find it amusing. This little fellow had also tired himself out for the entire day, so she would just let him sleep a bit more. The carriage driver exhaled before driving the carriage away from Fu Mountain and into the city. Emolienne took out the tea and snacks that he had prepared beforehand from the carriage compartment and fed his wifey for a while. Arbor seemed to have thought of something, and she couldn't help but ask curiously, Emolienne, why do you think that vassal prince of Anan did that? He wants to marry Commandery Princess Yen as his wife? He likes her? Emolienne couldn't help but laugh. What's there to like or dislike between them? At most, it's about benefits. The little guy curled his lips and was about to take a sip of tea when he suddenly felt the carriage stop. She almost spilled the tea that was about to reach her mouth. The crown prince's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He hurriedly grabbed her small hand and helped her stabilize her body. What happened? The coachman's driving skills were quite good. He wasn't usually so reckless, driving the carriage so bumpy. Your Highness, yes, yes. The coachman's tone was filled with surprise and helplessness. Arbor lifted the curtain and saw a carriage stopped in the middle of the busy street. The woman standing in front of the carriage with her hands on her hips and 4 or 5 palace guards behind her did look familiar. Emolien, come and take a look. Who is this? He looks familiar. Arbor couldn't help but tug at his sleeve. Prince Mo moved his head to her side and looked outside. His face darkened almost instantly. Seeing his expression change instantly, Arbor couldn't help but ask curiously, who is this person? 4th Princess Mo Shuang. It was this woman who was blocking the middle of the road. She simply didn't care about the Wang clan's dignity at all, and completely disgraced the Mo clan. Mo Lien was about to lift the curtain and alight from the carriage with a dark face. Chapter 1258. Mo Lien's handsome face darkened. Just as he was about to get off the carriage and berate her to stop, he heard the 4th Princess Mo Shuang abruptly shout, "Do it!" 4 to 5 guards in the procession surged forward, trying to break through the carriage in the middle of the road. The passers-by hurriedly moved aside, all of them looking at that woman strangely. Arbor leaned against the carriage window, watching with great interest. From time to time, he would tug at Emolien's sleeve and ask, "Emolien, guess what's inside that carriage?" Prince Mo's expression already couldn't be any darker. He practically didn't need to guess to know what this 4th Princess Mo Shuang was blindly excited about. There had to be a peerlessly handsome man inside this carriage. Otherwise, she wouldn't have spent so much effort, blocking the road to rob someone, and also trying to break the carriage. Because the 4th Princess Mo Shuang was completely uninterested in anything other than handsome men. Her greatest hobby in this life was to collect all kinds of handsome men. It would be best if she could bring all of them back to her princess residence to raise. If it weren't for the great king fiercely cutting her monthly allowance, this fellow reckoned that her princess residence would soon be unable to accommodate any handsome men. Everyone knew that this was definitely an oddity in the Mo Kingdom capital. This princess's strange anecdotes could go on for 3 days and 2 nights without stopping. At this time, seeing that she had blocked a carriage and was in a deadlock with the other party, several commoners who recognized the princess all stopped in their tracks and looked over curiously. However, they were well aware that this princess's temperament wasn't very good, so they couldn't help but provoke this fellow. Everyone only silently hid in a corner to watch the show. Before long, they saw the carriage wall being pulled open with a bang, and a figure flew out with a whoosh. His feet tapped lightly on a stall, and he was already rapidly flying in Arbor's direction. Wow! The crowd of onlookers all revealed expressions of, as expected of a handsome man, and swept disdainfully at the 4th Princess Mo Shuang. Heavens! Sure enough, Princess Mo Shuang was snatching handsome men on the streets again. This temperament of hers probably wouldn't change even if she died. Arbor was leaning against the window of the carriage, watching the show. Suddenly, the carriage stopped in the middle of the road, was pulled apart, and a person flew out from it. She glanced around and couldn't help but be stunned. Wasn't this the Qin estate's Grand Duke Ziqin Xian? Emolien is the Qin family's first Qin. I saw it. Emolien's handsome face was dark, and he was so angry that he didn't want to talk. He raised his hand and hugged Arbor. Dong! His carriage was kicked from the outside, and a figure rushed into the carriage in a panic. When he saw Arbor, his eyes suddenly lit up. The moment she opened her mouth, she screamed in panic, "Jojo, save me!" His figure flashed and pounced toward Arbor in the carriage. Scram! Prince Mo kicked out without hesitation, aiming for the man's face. Eldest Qin quickly dodged to the side, rolling and crawling into the carriage, hiding behind Arbor. "Jojo, save me!" Before Qiao Mu could speak, she heard the carriage driver's blood-curdling scream from outside. Then, the carriage curtains were forcefully torn apart, and a woman fiercely jumped into their carriage. She didn't even see who was inside the carriage before she angrily rebuked. "Where did this little witch come from? Get out of the way." "Impudent." Mo Lien was furious and coldly rebuked her. Fourth Princess Mo Shuang instinctively shuddered, but when she saw the crown prince sitting in the carriage, her pretty face instantly turned pale. Today was over. Sleep was over. Chapter 1259. Heavens! Heavens! Why was the crown prince here? Mo Shuang covered her mouth with her hand and revealed a shocked expression. She then swept her gaze over Arbor and finally recognized him. "It's you!" That day, she had barged into her father's palace and begged him to grant her the eldest young master. At that time, her father had been imprisoned by the demon law in the main hall because of this damned crown princess. Sitting in her father's bedchamber and eating leisurely, Gong Chong, and didn't dare to offend her. Mo Shuang's scalp was about to explode. She finally understood that her brainless act of barging into the crown prince and crown princess's carriage. She wanted to cry but had no tears. Usually, when she saw the crown prince, she would run as far away as she could. But she didn't dare to be impudent in front of this crown prince. If she offended the crown prince, her days would be even more difficult. Crown prince. Mo Shuang smiled embarrassedly and took a step back. She didn't dare to step forward again, but her eyes couldn't help but linger on the eldest young master, who was huddled in the corner. The eldest young master was meekly and weakly huddled in the corner of the carriage, hiding behind Arbor and biting his fingers. He had a "this young master is so scared" look as he looked pitifully at Arbor. Arbor only glanced at him and couldn't help but turn his head back. The eldest young master was stunned and wondered in his heart. Just now, Mu Xiaobao's glance, did it have a hint of disdain? Arbor really does have a lot of disdain. A grown man was actually chased like a dog by this fourth princess Mo Shuang, who had no cultivation at all. It would be strange if she didn't despise him. Xiaobao. The eldest young master raised a lustrous claw and carefully tugged at the ribbon under Arbor's sleeve. Slap! Mo Lien slapped his hand away and hugged Arbor to her side. She glared at the eldest young master with a warning gaze. "Get out of the carriage immediately." "No, I won't go. This crazy woman is here. If I get out, I'll be captured by her. I'm not going. I'm not going. I'm not going." Mo Lien looked at eldest young master's expression and wanted to slap him to death. What the hell was he pretending for? With his cultivation, how could he be so powerless when facing a woman with no cultivation in a place like the lower realms? No one would believe it. "Little treasure. Don't be noisy." Xiao Mu forcefully swung her hand, smacking the eldest young sir's head loudly. Mo Lien. Eldest Qin was speechless. In the next second, the little fellow raised his leg and kicked forth Princess Mo Shuang, who had changed her expression, out of the carriage. Eldest young master clapped and cheered excitedly behind her. "Amazing, amazing. Little treasure. Beat her. Beat her." Arbor leaped out of the carriage. A pair of cold, electrifying eyes filled with pressure swept across the street. Those passers-by who were hiding in the corners to watch the show jumped in fright and hurriedly shrank their heads back into the corner. In less than 2 minutes, they heard banging sounds on the street, accompanied by fourth Princess Mo Shuang's pig-like screams. "Stop! Stop! Stop! Stop!" Mo Shuang's guards were just about to make a move when the crown prince lifted the curtain and walked down from the carriage and glared at them. "Who dares to make a move?" Those guards immediately rolled on the ground in fright. Who would dare to care about the princess's life or death? They themselves were about to die from the crown prince's cold glare. Arbor sent a flying kick. Chapter 1260. Fourth Princess Mo Shuang screamed in horror, her eyes bulging out of their sockets. In the next second, the crown prince consort kicked the large plate in the face. It flew out with a whoosh and smashed fiercely into a nearby stall. With a loud bang, the auntie who was watching the commotion from under the stall was scared out of her wits, and she scrambled out from behind the stall. Turning back, The auntie looked at the fourth princess, who was sprawled on the ground, with fear in her eyes. Fuck, this is too tragic. Fourth princess's nose was bleeding profusely, and her eyes were swollen from that icy stoic little girl's slaps, looking like two walnuts hanging from her eye bags. She looked as wretched as one could imagine. Arbor pattered over to fourth princess Emoshwang. The fourth princess was so frightened that she retreated backwards. Her eyes were filled with fear, and she subconsciously covered her face with her hands, shaking them and screaming, "Stop hitting me! Stop hitting me! Stop hitting me! Who's the little demoness?" Arbor shouted with a cold expression. Not to mention fourth princess Emoshwang's stupefied expression. Even Emo Lien, who was walking over in the carriage, couldn't help but facepalm. "Speak. Who is?" Fourth princess swallowed her saliva while trembling. Looking at the little girl's stoic face, she replied wittily, "Me, me, me, me." Eldest young master leaned against the carriage with one leg slightly bent. He propped his chin on his hand and shook his head repeatedly with a sigh. So worrisome. After all this time, it turned out that little treasure, this child, had hit her because someone had called her little demoness. To think that he had naively thought that our dear little treasure had finally been enlightened and would fly into a rage over a handsome man. Arbor swept a glance at fourth princess. "Why did you barge into someone else's carriage?" Me. Fourth princess looked at the little girl, stupefied. "Speak," Arbor shouted angrily. The audience. Why did they have the urge to laugh? Did they even need to freaking speak? How bad was this little girl's eyesight to not see that fourth princess had charged into her family's carriage to capture the handsome eldest young master of the Qin estate? Robbing people in broad daylight. Do I look like I'm that easy to rob? Arbor raised his foot and pretended to kick him. The fourth princess hurriedly moved her buttocks backward, brushing against the ground as she stepped back. She stretched out her hands and waved them repeatedly. "I wouldn't dare, I wouldn't dare. Don't hit me, I wouldn't dare. I won't rob again." Prince Emo didn't say anything and just laughed at the side. Eldest young Sir Qin jumped off the carriage and walked towards Arbor with a slightly melancholic expression. How blind must this lass be to think that the fourth princess riding the carriage was a robbery? Arbor turned around and glared at him. "Let's go." Eldest young master was speechless. Feeling wronged, the eldest young master pitifully looked at Arbor and said, "Xiao Bao, we've been together for many days. Can't you treat me a little better?" "Nonsense. Who is Xiao Bao?" Arbor's little face was cold as he said to the eldest son expressionlessly, "I don't even know what you're talking about." Eldest young Sir Qin. Oh my, this damn lass. She was still trying to deceive him at this point. Now, even that dumb woman Yang Fengyan knew that she was the Mu Xiao Bao who had previously snuck into their Qin estate. This little fellow was so stubborn. Arbor swept a glance at him before turning to trot to the crown prince's side. "I want to eat small wontons." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.